How's it going, everyone? It is I, Anime Outlet, and this is What If Deku Was One Punch Man, the movie. And now, before we begin, I would just like to ask you all to please put your what if suggestions down in the comment section below. Sit back, relax, and enjoy, and now, let's begin. I'm sorry, Izuku, but I'm afraid to say you were quirkless. You're not going to get a quirk. You don't have a special superpower. What? You're joking, right? Izuku would shakily say towards the doctor. I'm sorry, but I wish I was joking. You really don't have a quirk. Izuku would start shakily laughing before tears would start to slowly fall out of his wide young eyes. As Inko would reach down her hand towards Izuku as he would shakily grab it, closely tightening his grip around Inko's hand. She would pull Izuku's arm as if trying to make him sit up. As he would do so standing up, she would then look on towards her crying child. "Come on, Izuku, let's go home," she would say, as Izuku's tears now wholly falling out of his eyes, as he just didn't know what to think. All his life, he had watched videos of All Might saving people. All his life, he had wanted to become a hero. And now, those couple of doctor's words had completely just shattered Izuku's dreams into tiny millions of pieces. As Izuku just couldn't comprehend it. He wanted to save people. He wanted to become a hero. Why was he one of the unlucky few who were born with a quirk? Why wasn't he the lucky ones who got a quirk, who got powerful quirks? Why? Why was he the one who was born quirkless? Why him? That's all Izuku could ask himself. Why? Why him? As Izuku would ask this towards his mother, but she couldn't speak. As after hearing Izuku speak like this, tears would start flowing out of her eyes as well. As Izuku not receiving an answer from his mother, he would expect the worst, as his tears would now flow out of his eyes just like a river, crashing down onto Izuku's face. As Izuku would then think of another question, one he had thought to himself ever since the doctor said he was quirkless. Could I still become a hero? Izuku would say innocently towards his mother. I can't answer that, Izuku. And that's up to you to decide. Do you still want to become a hero? Yes, I'm going to become a hero, Izuku would say, as Inko would then try to smile on with tears masking it. Oh, then Izuku, you can become a hero, she would say, as Izuku would also smile on, trying to give sort of a light to this dark time. As all of this would happening, Inko would pull into her house. She would then get Izuku out of his car seat before walking him to the front door, where they would open the door and Izuku would walk up to his room. So he would sit down on his bed, staring up at the ceiling, with the ceiling fan running rampant. He just couldn't think. He was going to become a hero, no matter what. It doesn't matter if he's quirkless and he doesn't have a power. He knows he's going to become a hero. He's going to persevere throughout everything that's going to try to block his path to becoming the best hero of all time. And so Izuku would begin his journey to becoming a hero. However, he was still quite young and still very naive. And so with Izuku's plans to become a hero, many of whom, including his mother, while not telling him, would think Izuku was no chance. Inko would continue giving Izuku words of confidence, saying that he's going to become a hero if he keeps telling himself that, if he keeps the confidence knowing he'll become a hero. But deep down, Inko knew there was very little chance of Izuku even making it into a hero school in general. And so Izuku basically had no chance at becoming a hero. So when Izuku would return to school the next day, many of the kids would ask Izuku what type of quirk he was going to have, or even if he had a quirk in general. Izuku, with full confidence in the world, would try to say he was quirkless, but every time he would say it, it was as if his tongue and just mouth would stop working. He couldn't say he was quirkless. It was just something was stopping him from doing so. However, Izuku would barely be able to mutter out that he was quirkless, all of that confidence draining out of Izuku, as Bakugo Katsuki would push past everyone before staring down on the young Izuku. "Oh, a quirkless kid, huh? So you were born without a power. That's quite the shame. I suspect you're not trying to become a hero anymore. Are you, Izuku?" Bakugo would say, his hand now gripping onto Izuku's shoulder, as Izuku would stare directly into Bakugo's eyes, causing him to recoil a bit. "I'm going to become a hero, Bakugo," as that confidence would completely go right back into Izuku, as all of that confidence and determination would fuel Izuku's words. "I'm going to become a hero, Bakugo, and I'm going to become a better hero than you, or all of these kids." Here, as Bakugo would merely just laugh, taking his hand off of Izuku's shoulder before stepping back a couple of steps. You becoming a hero? Please, don't joke with me, Izuku. Come on, we all know you're not even gonna become a hero. You probably won't even be able to get a job, all because you're quirkless. Why don't you start telling yourself that into your thick skull? You're not going to become a hero, Izuku. Trust me. There's no chance you're gonna become one. And even if you get into a hero school like UA, you're just gonna die trying to become a hero. It's best to give up now. As Izuku would stare glaring on directly into Bakugo's eyes, as Bakugo would stare right back, glaring at him, as Izuku would just sort of awkwardly laugh. Sure, Bakugo. I guess you're right. I guess I may never become a hero. All just because a doctor told me I was quirkless. You can keep telling yourself that, Bakugo, but I know I'm going to become a hero. After Izuku muttered those words, his life would end up becoming a living nightmare. Every single day, day in and day out, Bakugo would torture Izuku endlessly. Whenever the teachers wouldn't be looking, Bakugo would make sure Izuku's life was a living hell. Burning Izuku's things, throwing them out windows, even hurting Izuku. The bullying was never ending, as Izuku just didn't know what made Bakugo such a bully, what made Bakugo such a demon, as Izuku just wouldn't know. However, every time he would return home from school, he would make sure his mother knew everything was fine. He didn't want to worry his mother, as she was his mother after all. He wanted to make sure she was happy, and so he wouldn't tell her anything, hiding up his scrapes and bruises and burn marks from Bakugo with his clothing or from mud, saying he just fell on the playground running, or even exercising during gym class. However, Inko knew something wasn't right with Izuku. It just didn't make sense. No child should be returning home with this many just scrapes and bruises on her. Every time Izuku would forget to mask up all of his pain, she would see it, making Inko worry a bit more, wondering what was going on at Izuku's school. She would try to file complaints with them, but they wouldn't listen. Besides, who's going to care about a little quirkless kid in the end? They're not going to contribute anything to society. Please, they're quirkless. What are they going to do? Work as a cashier or something? As that's all the words that would be said to Inko, as she would end up just shaking her head at how disappointed she was in the school system. How could they do this to such... He's a kid! Who cares if he's quirkless? Who cares? He's still a kid. It just boggled Inko's mind. How could these people be working with kids and yet not care about them? It just confused her. She didn't get it at all. However, she didn't have to get it. The school system didn't care, and that was quite obvious to Inko. However, the day Izuku turned 10, he finally decided he was ready to turn everything around. as he merely saw all of that bullying as just another form of training. Izuku didn't train. He saw himself as too weak or too young. However, the day he turned 10, he asked his mother to give him some sort of weights. However, she said he didn't have enough money to do so, as Izuku would have to do some other ways to try and work out, and this would end up being his workout routine, as Izuku would start with 25 push-ups, sit-ups, and squats every single day, along with a 1-mile run. The next 6 months after this, Izuku would bump it up to 50 sit-ups, squats, and push-ups, and then a 3-mile run. As a year would end up passing from there, as Izuku would then bump it up to 100 push-ups, sit-ups, and squats, and then a 6-mile run, or around 10-kilometer run. As Izuku would do this every single day. Every single day they had recess at Izuku's school, he would run around the track. He would do this endlessly, as some of the kids would look on towards Izuku. He just looked so focused. They didn't want to break his focus. Something was telling them not to even go near Izuku. However, there was one couple of students that would end up going in and breaking Izuku's focus every single day, and this, of course, would be Bakugo Katsuki, just coming in, just mocking Izuku. "Oh, what are you doing, Izuku? Working out? Please, you should just quit your head right now. It's merely just a waste of time for you. When will you get it, Izuku? You're not going to become a hero, and even if you did, you'd barely manage to become a low-tier sidekick. Just give up, Izuku. Yeah, just give up. It's no use doing this." As Bakugo would end up walking away, just smirking, thinking that he'd gotten Izuku to give up. However, Izuku's determination was far too high for a couple of words to shatter his hopes. So, with that, Izuku would continue on doing this up until he was 14 or 15, as Izuku would be sitting in his desk, just staring on at the teacher's desk, as the teacher would end up walking in with a pile of papers. "Good morning, class. Pains me to say it's all your last day here at this school, but all of you are going to be going on to a nice high school, hopefully. Actually, there's 2 students trying out to make one of the best high schools in the area, UA High School. It appears both of them are trying out for the hero course, too. And those 2 students are Bakugo Katsuki and the quirkless wonder, Izuku Midoriya." Izuku would just put his hand to his forehead, as if just wondering, "Oh my god, why? Why would you have to say that? You're just making more trouble than there already had to be," Izuku would mutter under his breath, as the teacher would merely smirk on towards Izuku, as many of the classmates and students around Izuku would stare on towards him. "You? A quirkless kid trying to make the hero course? Please. It's only just a joke, isn't it, Izuku?" However, Bakugo didn't take it as a joke. He would stand up from his desk, pushing the chair out behind him, slamming into the student's desk behind him, as Izuku would feel it grip onto one of his shoulders, as a burning sensation would go right through Izuku's shoulder. "Don't trouble yourself, Izuku. You're only gonna get hurt. You shouldn't try out for the hero course. It's just not something you should do," Bakugo would say. However, Izuku would merely look on towards Bakugo. "Bakugo, why do you do this? Why do you make your life every bit as hard trying to convince me not to become a hero? Is it because you know I'll be a better hero than you'll ever be? Or is it because you don't want any competition, because you know when there's competition you're not always going to be the best? Maybe if you didn't let your ego get in the way, Bakugo, you'd be twice as good as a hero as you could have been right now. You're still flawed, Bakugo. Your ego and anger is shielding you from becoming a truly great hero. And even if you do make the UA entrance exam, you still will have anger issues. And the teachers are gonna know that. Your personality more fits a villain than a hero, Bakugo. And I'm just gonna wait until you realize that, Izuku would say before standing up as the bell would ring as soon as he stood up, walking out, not even caring to grab his things, just deciding to leave it behind, grabbing his application paper from the teacher before just walking out, as Bakugo would end up grabbing Izuku's backpack angrily before throwing it at Izuku, who's already at the door. Izuku would merely just reach out his hand, catching it behind his back before slinging it over his shoulder, as he would merely look back at Bakugo before thanking him, walking out, as Bakugo would now be fuming in anger, having two of the students or his lackeys having to hold him back from going in and possibly hurting Izuku. As Izuku would be walking out, he would just be smiling, knowing that his bully over the years had now just been fuming because how dare such a quirkless kid mock him in such a way, as Izuku would merely just be laughing to himself. That foolish Bakugo. I can't believe he's gotten even more foolish over the years. It's a shame. It really is a shame, Izuku would be saying, walking back to his house, as 10 months would end up passing. However, before this 10 months could pass, Izuku would be still walking home from school, as all of a sudden, a sludge villain would pop out of a sewer drain as Izuku is under a bridge. Oh, what do we have here? A kid. Oh, you're a real lifesaver. You're gonna save me from this damn #1 hero of this stupid society. Izuku would look on back towards the sludge villain, as Izuku, not paying attention to where the sludge villain had popped up, he would just stare endlessly on towards the sludge, who's going closer and closer towards Izuku, just muttering and saying how much of a lifesaver Izuku happened to be. As Izuku would stare on at the sludge villain, all of a sudden the two eyes would end up poking out of the sewer drain. However, Izuku didn't notice them, as these two eyes and two yellow golden strands of hair would be poking out as well. They would see the sludge villain just going in towards Izuku. However, this hero, poking their head out of the sewer drain, thought they should move in. That sludge villain's going to kill that boy. However, something about Izuku's demeanor just caused this hero to stop right in their tracks. They were curious. Why was this boy not running away? Why were they so confident they could beat this villain? As Izuku would stare on towards the sludge villain, who would then make just a move. Going on towards Izuku would wind his fist back, stepping forward before exploding his fist on directly towards the sludge villain, never making contact, but the pure air pressure alone would send tons of wind barreling on towards the sludge villain. As he would make contact with the sludge, it would explode, sending sludge scattering it all throughout the walls. As Izuku would look on throughout it, All Might would then pop up, just being amazed at Izuku's power. It mimicked his own, possibly even stronger, as All Might would look on towards the young kid, for saying, it appears I got here just in time, huh? Wow, it appears you did my job for me. I'd have to thank you for saving me some precious minutes, huh? Well, it's nice to meet you, Izuku would say, oh, Izuku. He would say, Izuku Midoriya, shaking All Might's hand, before All Might would then ask Izuku what his quirk was. Kid, your power, it's sort of like my own. Do you mind telling me what your quirk is? Izuku would really just laugh before putting his hand behind his head, just rubbing it. Well, that's quite the question you have, All Might. I'm kind of worried to tell you, but I don't actually have a quirk. What? You're playing games with me, aren't you, kid? No quirkless person could possibly have that much power within a punch. It's impossible, All Might would say, as Izuku would merely just start laughing even more. Well, that's where you're wrong, All Might. It's not impossible. I actually don't know how I got such power myself. My mother even took me to the quirk doctor when she saw that I had pretty much superhuman strength. And they even said I'm quirkless, so they can't really explain it either. It's quite weird, huh? It's kind of supernatural, I would say. Izuku would say, just laughing, as All Might would nod his head, just saying, yeah, that is quite strange, young man. Well, I better be going, All Might would say, collecting all of the sludge into a 2-liter bottle before jumping off. Izuku would stare on the person he had admired for years, happy to see that he had gotten to speak with his idol. There it was, All Might, and Izuku would just smile at it. He hadn't really watched All Might in a couple years, deciding more to focus on his training. However, I was happy to see that All Might's still saving people, even with his age. All Might has been in the hero society for years, saving people forever. So Izuku was just happy to see that he's still saving people and still kicking. He hasn't really focused on the news too much at all recently. So when those 10 months of training would end up passing, we see Izuku just in sort of a jog suit stretching outside of his house, as he would end up getting down into a sprinter's position before his mother would yell go, as he would then sprint off, running off towards UA, as everyone that was in his path would try to dodge Izuku, whoever would easily just dodge all around them, jumping around them in such speed, as he would end up making it to UA in just around 5 minutes or so. As Inko see this, she would then just smile. Boy, Izuku, have you grown over the years? Happy to see you're still confident as you when you were a child, even though you were told you were quirkless. You're quite the wonder, Izuku. Good luck, she would say before walking back into her house. As Izuku, now at the entrance of UA, he would continue on his stretches before walking into the auditorium, where he would then take a seat. He would end up seeing many people more pile in to the auditorium, where he would then end up seeing a yellow-haired figure appear on the stage with sort of a speaker-looking thing around their neck. "Good morning, UA examinees," they would yell as their voice would echo throughout the domed auditorium. "So, why don't we begin with the first exam? And that first exam just happens to be the written one. If you want to make it into UA, you have to be quite smart." So, President Mike would end up passing out all of these papers, as Izuku would end up receiving one. He would stare down at the paper before saying, "This is gonna be quite the hour," as he would end up slowly finishing the test with just around 20 minutes to spare on the time of the test. Izuku would hand in the test before walking back to his seat and just looking around at the auditorium. He had 20 minutes to wait, and he couldn't leave the auditorium, just as an added bonus so that he couldn't receive answers from anyone and possibly share them around. It was a highly secure school, and just to make sure no one made a run for it at all and tried to do something stupid, there was also guards or teachers up standing at the front making sure that no one tried anything funny, also watching for any cheaters. So with that, Izuku would end up just doing that as the 20 minutes would end up passing. With Izuku standing there, the people, President Mike would then announce something again. "Alright, the people that are not taking the hero course exam or the support course exam, you all may now leave." As President Mike would just point their hands towards the doors and exits. And now, the support course will now have 30 minutes to go grab their gadgets. Well, actually, that was last year's exam. You all will have 30 minutes to build a gadget with the supplied parts, as President Mike would point on it towards a massive pile of just parts sitting up in front of him. So now the hero course examinees may now follow some of the teachers, as the teachers would end up opening the doors, as all of them would be walking out after being handed a card with a letter on it, either A, B, or C. The card letter you have will be the represented just city you will be in. Since there's quite a lot of you, we had to split you up into 3 groups, A, B, or C. Izuku would get the the A card as he would end up walking off towards City A. As he would be sitting there, he would continue on stretching. We cut to now see Nezu sitting up in his office, staring on at one of the screens on the camera, looking on at City A's hallway. Nezu, I was reading some of the examinee's papers and application forms. It says here you allowed a quirkless kid to apply for the hero course? We've talked about this, Nezu. We've already had to settle things out of court because of a quirkless kid doing something stupid like this. Aren't you afraid they're going to get hurt or injured, possibly even killed like some of the other quirkless kids who have tried out? You should just have a little faith, Aizawa. One of these days, one of these quirkless kids are gonna make it into the hero program. Plus, I actually have a feeling. This quirkless kid, his name's Izuku, correct? I have a feeling he's going to be the one that's finally gonna be the quirkless kid that makes the hero program. It's just a feeling. Maybe you should have a little faith, Aizawa. As Aizawa would just say, I guess, Nezu, maybe I should have a little faith, he would say, as we now cut back to City A's hallway. We look on to see Izuku stretching as all of a sudden the creaky doors would slowly open, as Izuku would sprint off, jumping into action, exploding through the doors, as the people around him would feel air fly through them with their air just flowing back. What is that kid doing? Aren't we supposed to wait for someone to tell us to start? As all of a sudden, someone would come over the intercom, present Mike, the person that had been taking and just explaining the hero course and the written exam at the start. What are you kids doing? Go, go! Heroes don't have to wait for someone to tell them to go save someone. As all of the heroes would jump up in shock before jumping off, trying to get some of the robots. However, they had already just been too late. Izuku flying throughout the arena, not really flying, but just jumping at such a high velocity, it looked like he was flying so low to the ground. As every time he would see robots, he would stop in his tracks, winding his fist back, slamming it down into the robots, destroying them instantly. As Izuku would continue on doing this, as all of the heroes watching on from the TV would just look on in shock. This is a quirkless kid, isn't he? How is he doing something like this? Many of them would ask, as Nezu would just sort of laugh. Well, I guess that marks him down as a Class 1A member, huh? It appears the quirkless one might actually be the best one in this exam. Nezu, how is he doing this? He would ask, as Nezu would merely just shrug his shoulders. That's a question I don't know, Aizawa. That's a question I have no clue about. How he's quirkless and how he's doing something like this. That is quite the question, isn't it? Nezu would just sort of awkwardly say, as Izuku continued jumping around, destroying all of these robots, as all of the teachers would stare on. This is insane! As Izuku racking up hundreds upon hundreds of points, so easily destroying all of these robots. As finally Nezu would click a button coming over the speaker. Izuku Midoriya, can you please save some of the robots for the other examinees? Izuku would stare up, looking around to where the voice had come from before just saying, okay, as he would end up jumping up onto one of the rooftops before staring down at the other examinees, struggling to defeat some of the robots. As Izuku would smile to himself, being quite confident that he had made the hero course, and the top hero course program for the first years at that. So with Izuku smiling on, he would end up just sitting there. However, a couple minutes would end up passing, as all of the sudden shaking would end up being just heard throughout, as the rumbling and just clanking of different types of metals and concretes would be heard all throughout the city, bouncing off of the building's walls, as Izuku would feel like an earthquake was happening. He would get up from the position he was in, lying down on this rooftop, as he would look around all throughout the city. He was on one of the tallest buildings, of course. However, he would end up seeing a massive skyscraper that looked like it was moving towards him. However, that was no skyscraper. That was the zero-pointer, something President Mike had told all of the students that they are best just to avoid. As he would be looking on, he would end up hearing a cry for help, as he would look on towards the massive zero-pointer that was towering over him, even though he was standing on the tallest building in the city. Izuku would end up hearing that cry for help before jumping up into the air, as he would end up spotting someone trapped under the rubble, as Izuku, falling back to the ground, would explode off towards where this had been heard. As the zero-pointer coming closer and closer to the girl, Izuku would end up rushing in, grabbing one of the boulders, throwing it off into one of the near buildings, as he would end up picking up the girl, rushing off, before handing the girl that was trapped under the rubble to someone, as he would end up rushing back towards the zero-pointer, jumping up in the air, winding his fist back, before having the fist barrel on towards the zero-pointer, making contact square on the center of the zero-pointer's chest, as the zero-pointer would be sent flying back, colliding with the wall behind it that made the city, just the city's barrier, as it would end up collapsing, having a massive hole in the zero-pointer, as everyone would just look on in complete shock, along with the teachers, as Nezu would merely just be laughing. I guess I made a right choice allowing for that quirkless kid to try out for UA. Huh, Izawa, Nezu would merely be saying with the biggest grin on his face. Izawa would merely just shake his head saying, yep, I guess you did make the right choice. His power, it's sort of like All Might's, yes? Yeah, it does have quite the resemblance. I wonder how, I'll have to ask him how he got such a power. It'd be quite interesting to see his answer. Maybe he was just lying about being quirkless. Who knows, Nezu would say, as Nezu would then come over the intercom saying that the testing and the hero exam had now finished, and for all of them that they may now go home. Izuku opens the door to his house, where we now see Inko sitting at the kitchen table fumbling around with her fingers. She was quite scared Izuku wasn't going to perform well or was possibly going to get injured. However, when she heard the door opening and the twisting of the doorknob, she instantly had her head jolt towards the door. As Izuku would open the door, he would step in before shutting it behind him. Oh, Izuku, you're back. How'd the exams go? I think I did quite well, Mom. Thanks for asking. I think I made it into UA. They had to ask me to stop destroying all of the things for the exam. For the hero exam, that is. Inko would look on proudly towards her son as she would then start crying. I've seen you grow so fast. You grow from being quirkless to now having some type of power. I don't understand it at all, Inko would say, with tears flowing down her eyes as Izuku would hug her. Oh, come on, Mom, this isn't the time to cry right now. We should be happy, as I'm pretty sure I made it into the hero school, and after demonstrating what I'm capable of, I don't think they'd just not accept me because of my quirklessness, after all. As Inko would just sort of laugh. Yeah, hopefully they don't do that, Inko would say. 2 weeks would pass as Izuku would end up having a letter addressed to him in the mail, as Inko would end up looking down at the letter with a box below it, as she would end up reading it, pushing the box inside, as she would end up grabbing this letter, reading it that it was addressed to Izuku with a big gold stamp of UA right on the front of the envelope. As she would clench it in her hand, she would rush up the stairs, banging on Izuku's door. Izuku, Izuku, Izuku! I think your letter came from UA, Inko would say excitedly, as Izuku would open the door, staring down at his mother, as she would hand him the letter, her hands now shaking in excitement, wondering if he had made it into the hero school of his dreams. As Izuku would end up opening the letter before shutting the door, as his mother would sit impatiently right by it, just hopping around, wondering what Izuku was going to say to her. As Izuku would open up the letter, a small disc would fall out. Hello, Izuku Midoriya. It's me, Nezu, the principal at the lovely hero school that is UA. I have to inform you that you have made it into the hero program, Class 1A, the top hero course you could have made for first years. Congratulations, Izuku. Also, I would like to inform you that you are the first year representative, scoring the highest amount of points out of all of the students in the hero exam. Congratulations on that as well. I'm quite shook at how powerful you are, and I'm looking forward to asking you a couple questions about what your application paper had said. But anyway, this disc will now self-destruct in around 5 seconds, Nezu would say, checking a watch. As he would start ticking away, Izuku would grab the device, just hopping it throughout his hands like a hot potato, before he would open his window, throwing it out of the window as it would then explode in midair. As Ko, hearing this, would end up opening Izuku's door, just pushing it open. She would look frantically around, scared that something had happened to Izuku, as Izuku would be now sitting on his bed, just smiling. So, Izuku, what happened? She would say, questioning him. Oh, I made it, Izuku would say, as those 3 words just captivated Inko's mind. You did? Inko would say, smiling on towards her son. Yeah. That's pretty cool, I guess, Izuku would say, still not sure what to say. Inko would then push in the box that presumably had something in it, also addressed to him. Izuku would pull it open with his bare hands as he would look inside to see it was his UA uniform. As Izuku would smile on, falling back in his bed, just wondering what had happened over the past couple of years. He had grown so much, and now he made it into the school of his dreams. He just couldn't believe it. Izuku would be smiling on as his mother would towards him as well. Another week would end up passing as Izuku would be putting on his uniform as he would walk down the stairs as his mother would be preparing breakfast for him. Oh, I'm so proud of you, Izuku. Good luck on your first day of school, she would say, as Izuku would bid her farewell before opening up the front door, leaving to go towards his school. As he would be walking along, he would just be thinking of how much he's grown, and he couldn't believe it. As he would look on at the massive arches of UA, as he would grab his UA ID before scanning it, as it would allow Izuku into the school, as he would end up seeing paparazzi around the door, having to shove them by to get in. As Izuku would be doing this, he would walk in, seeing the massive building in front of him, just towering over him. It was huge. Izuku was just captivated by it. It was crazy. Their budget must be insane, Izuku would think to himself, as he would walk in going towards the first years, as he would end up seeing the Class 1 classroom, as he would open the door, sliding the door open, as he would end up just having a wave of sound wash over him. It was like everyone was yelling in the room at once, as Izuku would just facepalm, being like, oh my, why does everyone have to be so loud? He would walk to one of the only open seats left, sitting down, staring out of the window, his fist on to the side of his head, just looking out at all of the birds flying around the campus. As Aizawa would end up walking in, sliding the door open before walking up to the podium at the front of the class, before just standing there, staring with a blank gaze on towards everyone around him. That took you long enough. I can't believe it took you so long to quiet down. You all are high schoolers now. You can't be spending this much time. You're also training to become heroes. You can't be wasting so much time on futile things as small talk and conversations. You're wasting your time and mine. You have a limited training time throughout your years here, so I suggest you use it wisely and to its fullest ability. So anyway, I'm Shota Aizawa, otherwise known as Eraserhead, your hero teacher for this year, along with your class, well, just your teacher this year. Your hero teacher may be different. Nezu, the principal, has still yet to decide it. Anyway, these are your PE uniforms, Aizawa would say, holding up, dangling a uniform. Those are what you're going to be using for today. We're going to be doing a quirk test. So anyway, go find the locker rooms. Get changed into your PE uniforms and meet me by testing ground E, alright? Go. You all have 20 minutes or else I'll expel all of you. At least all of you that are late. You can't be late as a hero. That means more casualties of innocent victims. So, you gotta learn to be quick. By the time Aizawa finished his sentence, all of the students were gone. However, Izuku was faster than all of them, even Ida, using his quirk throughout the halls, trying to get faster than everyone. However, by this time, all of the other students in the UA had completely gone towards the auditorium, which was completely across the campus for all of the introductions and teachers and all of that. While Class 1A, being the hero course, or one of the hero courses, the top one, had just decided to completely skip it. So, since they're not taking an entire day to deal with introductions and stupid things that Aizawa deemed worthless, they would have the entire building to run around to go find the locker rooms. Izuku, using his insane speed, would end up finding them in no time, as he would end up grabbing one of the keys, which just happened to have his name on it, so he would look around for the locker before end up finding it, opening it up, putting his PE uniform on, before racing off towards testing site E. As he would then get there, as he would end up just sitting up in a tree, waiting for the rest of the people to end up getting there. As 10 minutes would pass, and then another 5, Aizawa would slowly stroll towards the tree before sitting down with a yellow sleeping bag, as he would end up falling asleep, dozing off, with Izuku just staring down at him. Izuku would end up wondering where all of his classmates had been. Aizawa had made it extra tricky for all of the students to just find the locker rooms. See, Izuku had done things many of the students had not. He had just had a paper in his uniform pocket, which all of them actually just had. As when they were shipped out, each one of them had a map for the entire UA school inside of just their box, and so many of them not looking, as it was hidden, Izuku had decided to tear out the box and possibly reuse it, and so while tearing it out, he had found a map, and so with that he had known the exact location of the locker rooms. While the rest of the class had started to struggle looking for them, many of them still not even being changed into their PE uniforms yet. So as another 20 minutes and then 30 minutes would pass, Izuku would end up falling asleep into the tree as well. As finally some of the students would end up making it there to see Aizawa, their teacher, completely asleep in a tree. As they would end up waking up Aizawa, Aizawa would end up looking around to see that basically the entire class was there. However, he noticed one thing. Hey, what happened to the green fellow? Aizawa would say. I think his name was Izuku Midoriya. All of them would end up looking around as if someone was late, as Izuku would end up falling out of the tree, landing directly on his head, jumping up completely out of his just sleepless state, so he'd be holding his head in pain before looking around to see all of the class was staring at him. Huh, so that's where you were this whole time, Aizawa would say. Oh, so I guess the class finally arrived here. Took y'all long enough. I can't believe I actually fell asleep, Izuku would say, holding his forehead, as the class would then begin. Alright, Izuku, here, Aizawa would say, tossing a ball to him, as Izuku would catch it instantly. You got the highest score on the entrance exam. What does that mean? Oh, yeah, that means, you get to go first. As I would say, still quite sleepy, having been woken up suddenly by all of the students. So go into that circle over there and throw the ball as far as you can, Aizawa would say, barely paying attention, as Izuku, stepping into the circle, would grip the ball before winding his arm back, as he would end up launching his hand forward, sending the ball flying, as it would go completely into space from the sheer power, as Izuku was now into a small crater, having just the massive air pressure and just pressure of Izuku's throw, sending all of the dirt and just stone under him flying or being completely destroyed, as all of the students would look on in shock at Izuku's sheer power. That power, your quirk, it's just like All Might, some of them would yell towards Izuku. Over Izuku would just sheepishly smile. Yeah, I guess my power is close to All Might's, Izuku would say, as many of them would notice, Izuku didn't call his power a quirk. He called it a power. That was quite strange of him. However, Bakugo would push past everyone before staring directly on at Izuku, putting his finger to Izuku's chest, yelling at him. How the hell did you do that? You damn Deku, you're quirkless! You don't have a quirk! How'd you manage something just like that? Were you lying to me all these years? Lying that you didn't have a quirk? As Izuku would stare on at Bakugo before pushing him back. Calm down, Bakugo. I wasn't lying to you. I was quirkless back then, and I'm still quirkless now. However, what I've been able to achieve is surely just because of hard work. So maybe if you weren't bullying me all those years and you were actually working out, you possibly would have had some power like this. Maybe you should have used your time wisely, Bakugo, instead of being an idiot with it, Izuku would say, as many of the students would look on towards Bakugo. He had a fiery personality, and Izuku saying that Bakugo had been bullying him kind of matched what the personality was. As many of them would also begin to think what Izuku had told Bakugo back when. His personality, it matches those of what you'd think a villain would be. Many of them would think to themselves, not wanting to anger the Bakugo that was standing in front of them. And so Izuku standing there as Aizawa would begin the rest of the test, many of them performing average or sort of average. Many of their quirks didn't do well to a lot of these physical-based tests. However, Izuku would completely destroy it, dominating all of the tests with ease, as Izuku would just continue on easily doing all of the tests, as many of the students would end up just watching on as Izuku would end up just dominating, getting first easily, as many of them were physical-based tests. They weren't meant for a lot of the quirks that people had. As many of them would just say, well, it's no surprise Izuku got first, but it still wonders, many of the class wondering, but he's quirkless. It just doesn't make sense. How? How does he have such a power? Something that is so strong, something that possibly rivals All Might, or is even better than All Might. They just don't understand it at all. And so, Izuku, along with the class, would be dismissed as Aizawa would walk back to the class to collect his things, just wondering, this school year is going to be interesting with this new kid here, Aizawa would say to himself. We now see Izuku walking back into the building to get changed into his UA uniform to go home. As Izuku would be getting changed, he would hear over the intercoms something that strange. Izuku Midoriya, please head up to the principal's office before you leave today. Izuku would hear this and would wonder, did he do something wrong? Why else would he have to go to the principal's office? Oh yeah, Nezu, the principal, he wanted to ask me some questions. That's what he said in the acceptance thing. Well, I might as well get going, Izuku would say, rushing off to Principal Nezu's office. As Izuku would arrive, he'd end up seeing Nezu sitting there with his hands clapped together. I've been expecting you, Izuku. Now, I have a couple questions for you, Nezu would say, staring on towards Izuku. You said you're quirkless, correct? Izuku would nod his head. Yes, Nezu. Ever since I was 4, I've been said I was quirkless all of my life. However, as soon as I started training, I sort of just awakened this power. Are you sure it's not a quirk, Izuku? Have you gone back to the quirk doctor at all and gotten it checked out? Possibly they missed a quirk and you have awakened one. I don't think that's the case, Nezu. I've actually went back to the quirk doctor's office just around 6 months ago, so they wanted to see how much stronger I've gotten. They wanted to do some tests after hearing stuff from my mother about how I've sort of just materialized a quirk out of nowhere, even though I'm quirkless, or supposed to be quirkless. So, I went back there. They did some tests and found I'm still quirkless. I don't have a quirk. And so I wonder what could have happened. it questions even me. But honestly, I just accept it at this point. I have a power that I've luckily gotten through hard work, so yeah, that's pretty much it, Suki would say as Nesu would just nod his head. Okay, that's pretty much the only question I had for you. Anyway, you can go home. I still need some time to think about what could possibly be causing this phenomenon, Nezu would say as Izuku would nod his head. Alright, goodbye, Nezu, Izuku would say, walking back to his house. 2 weeks would end up passing with some small training lessons here and there. However, it was not hero training. They weren't fighting each other like heroes. And so, finally, with them sitting down after lunch, they would all be wondering what was happening. However, Aizawa would walk into the room, grab a piece of chalk before writing up on the board, Hero Class, before walking out, setting the chalk back on the ground as he would walk out of the room. Many of them would wonder what Aizawa had meant, however, a lot of them would also realize what he had meant by that. This was their first hero class out of the whole year. They're gonna finally see who their hero teacher is. Many of them would start to get excited, wondering what was going to happen. As all of a sudden they would hear stomping and the building would sort of start to shake, stomping coming from down the hall, as all of a sudden the sliding door would completely just be destroyed, being shattered, as a punch would be flying through it, as there stood in the shattered remains of the door a shining golden figure. It was All Might, the #1 hero, many of them would say, jumping out of their seats, as all of them would look on in complete shock, as All Might would end up just laughing. Settle down, class, settle down. It's not that impressive to see the #1 hero, is it? So, anyway, like all of you have seen on the chalkboard here, today's your first hero class and first hero training lesson. So, anyway, let's begin. Many of you cannot become heroes without your costume. So, with the costumes you've designed and with the help of the support course as of a couple of days ago, we have managed to get your hero costumes all settled out, All Might would say, as he would click a big red button, as all of a sudden a thing would come out of the wall, revealing just a bunch of suitcases. As all of the students would gather round, as All Might would start to hand them out, as it had each one of their names on it. With All Might handing them out, Zuku would receive his. As Zuku getting his, he would look on, opening the briefcase to see it was his hero costume. It was really nothing special. However, Zuku would shut the costume, as All Might would then ask them to all head down to City B, where they're going to be doing a training lesson. And then they're going to have to go to the locker rooms first, of course, to get changed into their hero, just uniforms or suits. So with them all rushing down, they would get changed into their hero suits, as Izuku would get changed first before rushing out. He didn't want anyone to see his hero costume. He sort of wanted to see the surprise on many of their faces. As Izuku would get to just City B and the exact building All Might had told them to go to, Izuku would see All Might standing there as Izuku would walk up to him. Izuku, why are you wearing, normal clothes? I'll have to explain that later, possibly when we're making our hero names, Izuku would say, as it just looked like he was wearing basic clothes you could find someone just sitting in some random restaurant wearing, as Izuku wearing just normal shorts and a t-shirt, as many of the other students just wearing all of these fancy looking things with random assortments of gadgets and all of that would look on in just surprise at Izuku, wondering why he chose to go with such a basic hero suit design. However, that was besides the point. All Might would start to explain the hero's first villains test. That is what they were going to be doing that day. How there's going to be 2 teams of 2. A team of heroes and a team of villains. The team of heroes will walk into a building and are going to be tasked with going up against the villains. In order to defeat them, they either have to touch a device planted by the villains that is set to go off in 15 minutes, just acting as a time limit for the heroes. If that time limit goes out, villains win. If the heroes heroes all get captured, villains win. Villains all get captured, or the device gets touched, sort of deactivating the device. That means the villains lose and the heroes win. And so as All Might would look on at sort of a fishbowl with a bunch of random things in it, he would pull it out, reading off the name, as he would see Izuku Midoriya, Hero Team, he would say before setting it down. Reaching in, Bakugo Katsuki, Villain Team, setting it back down. So he would pull out another name, Momo Yaoyorozu, Hero Team. He would set that down before pulling out another name, Tenya Ida, Villain Team. Alright, Bakugo and Ida, please head into the building. You will see the device sitting at the front door of it. Go plant it somewhere. You all will have 5 minutes to do so. The 5 minutes would pass, as All Might would then tell Izuku, along with Momo, that they may now head into the building. As Izuku would end up walking into the building along with Momo, as they would end up just all looking around. However, Izuku would be smiling, just with a killer intent. Cracking his knuckles, he would just continue on the smile, sending shivers down many of the students' spines that were looking on from one of the cameras. Why is Izuku smiling so weird? He looks like a devil, just wearing normal people clothes. It's strange. However, Momo would ask Izuku why he was acting so strange, as Izuku would turn around, just saying, I've wanted to finally be able to fight Bakugo for so long. I couldn't do so because I'd only get in trouble and Bakugo would be let off scot-free. So finally, I can finally fight him and show him who's boss, Izuku would say. As Izuku would be just walking around the halls aimlessly, turning the corners, as finally he would end up seeing sparks flare out from one of the corners, as Izuku would put his arm out in front of Momo. Momo, go that way. I believe the stairs are that way. I think I've found Bakugo, Izuku would say, as Momo would run off towards the stairs, as Izuku would be standing in the hallway, staring on as Bakugo would turn the corner. Well, 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 Bakugo. It appears we finally get to fight each other. All those years of you saying you were better than me, all because you were born with a special power. All of those years are finally going to go to waste, Izuku would say, staring down at his fists, as Bakugo would stare on at Izuku confused before jumping off. Like hell that's gonna happen, he would say, jumping off directly at him, reaching out his hands, sending an explosion going right towards Izuku. However, Izuku would just put his hand out completely straight, swiping up, sending the explosion barreling to the side of him, dispersing it instantly, having it run into some of the walls. That's not gonna work on me, Bakugo. You're gonna have to have some better technique than that, Izuku would say, before just stepping towards Bakugo. As Bakugo would rush on, going for a punch, landing it directly on Izuku's face. However, Izuku wouldn't budge, staring directly at Bakugo, before pulling his fist back, punching Bakugo across the face with very minimum amount of power, sending Bakugo directly through just a wall behind him, as Izuku would stare on at the defeated Bakugo sitting on top of a pile of rubble. Izuku would see Bakugo trying to get up, pulling himself up. I'm not gonna lose to you, you damn Deku, Bakugo would say, before rushing off towards Izuku, going for another explosion towards him. However, Izuku would dodge this as well. Come on, Bakugo. This isn't going to work. Continue on dodging all of Bakugo's attacks. Just give up. You know damn well you're not going to be able to defeat me. As Bakugo was saying, like hell that's going to happen. I've told you that already. I'm going to beat you, Deku. I've done it many times before. As Izuku would smile on towards Bakugo, releasing all of his killer intent. Oh, please, Bakugo. You know damn well I wasn't acting and using my full strength during those fights. I never even hit you once or bullying me. Why don't you go ahead and stop acting so confident? You're right, I'm not gonna beat you, but you're gonna beat yourself, Izuku would say, as Bakugo would reach out trying to send an explosion. However, he would feel a hand wrap around his hand, as his hand would then be pulled on towards his head, as an explosion would be released, sending his head knocked backwards, as if a whiplash effect, as he would fall to the ground in a daze. His own explosion had hit him. He was confused, though, as he just couldn't see what happened. Izuku grabbed his wrist so fast, twisted his hand before putting it in the direction of Bakugo's head, sending an explosion towards him. Bakugo just couldn't explain it, as Bakugo would end up being knocked out by his own attack. Izuku would tie him up, putting him around his back before walking onto the top floor, where we would see Momo in the midst of a fight, with Ida trying to kick down on her bow staff. However, who was holding strong, as her hands would start to shake, as Ida would continue on the attack, pushing her back and back. Over as soon as Izuku would arrive, he would grab both 2 feet of the unconscious Bakugo before swinging it around, slamming Bakugo's body into Ida, as Momo would be yelled to duck. As Ida would be sent flying into one of the walls, both him and Momo would at the same time touch the device, as All Might would yell over the intercom in excitement, "And the hero team wins!" He would yell, as Ida would look down in disappointment before seeing a hand reach out to him, as Izuku would pull him up after Ida would grab his hand. "Good game, Ida. Although I didn't get to see you much in action, you'd be able to fend off Momo quite well," Izuku would say, as Ida would just sort of nod his head. As all of them would walk back, Izuku carrying the device, putting it down in front of the building, he would walk back to where All Might, along with the rest of his classmates, were situated. "Good job, Izuku, and as you were able to win with ease. So, now may the next match step forward." As all of the matches would end up going, many of the students would walk back to the classroom after getting changed back into their UA uniforms. They still had around 30 minutes left of school before it ended. As Izuku would be sitting down in his seat, all of a sudden, Midnight would end up appearing out of nowhere. "Hello, Class 1A! Since you all now have your hero costumes, it's best if we decide what your hero names are gonna be. Of course, you can always change it later, although it's advised not to, because you're possibly gonna be building up publicity with that hero name already. So, anyway, why don't we begin with our hero names?" As many of them would start to brainstorm, Izuku had a hero name in mind. As Izuku would be thinking, that was what his hero name was going to be from the very beginning, letting the entire world know that a quirkless person can become a hero. As Izuku would be called up after a couple people would go up, just showing what they wanted their hero name to be, Izuku would show the whiteboard he had written his hero name down on. The quirkless one, Midnight would look on, just saying, "Are you sure that's what your hero name you want to be?" "The quirkless one?" she would ask, confused on towards Izuku. "Now that you say the name out loud, it's, I'm not sure if I like the quirkless one anymore. How about this?" Izuku would say, writing down a new name on the whiteboard. As he would then show it to the class, Midnight would then say, "So you kept the same aesthetic with your name. I see that. But I guess it makes you seem not more like a villain or something. I don't know. Whatever you want, I guess. You may go be seated," Midnight would say towards Izuku, as Izuku would just nod, going back to sit at his desk. Putting the whiteboard down, he would stare down at the name he had written. No Cork Man. It was a drop off from the quirkless one, as it sounded more menacing and cool, but No Cork Man also just sounded funny at the same time. Izuku just, he could go with either one, to be honest with you. He just didn't know what to choose. He'd have to decide later. However, for now, his name will be No Cork Man, as it really fits his casual aesthetic with just shorts and a t-shirt. So with that, the rest of the class would end up choosing their names, as the next day would end up following, the day after that, and the day after that one, as a week and then 2 weeks would pass from there on, as we now see the class walk into school the next day. Aizawa would be seated up at the front of his desk, as he would end up standing up once everyone was in and quieted down. "Good morning, class. Today we are going to be going on a field trip. we are going to be going to a place known as the USJ. It's quite the place. We'll be learning about rescue missions in all sorts of different environments you're going to have to fight villains in. Right now, we are just going to get used to it. As many of you wanting to become heroes, you're going to have to do some other jobs, such as being a firefighter, something like that. Of course, there will be heroes with water quirks, but you're going to be tasked with helping heroes just like that. That is just one small example of what is in the USJ. So now, you all are either going to put on your PE uniforms or your hero costume, and then you are going to head down towards the bus bay, get on a bus, and then we are going to travel to the USJ. You may all do that now, as I would say before standing up and walking out of the room, as the rest of the class would hurry up to go down, get changed, and then hurry off towards the bus bay. As Aizawa would see a bunch of them end up arriving, as would then see the last person get onto the bus, as he would give the go-ahead for the bus driver to start driving. Many people would be sitting on the bus and would be staring at Izuku. Izuku, you said you're quirkless, but your power you displayed in defeating All Might and Ida, you can't be quirkless. It just doesn't add up. How can you have such a power stronger than all of us, but yet you're quirkless? Izuku would just nod his head. Yeah, that is quite the tough question. I really can't answer it, to be honest. I'm an anomaly, I guess. Quite the strange one. So, I guess that's pretty much the only explanation to it. Sorry I couldn't give you any further explanation saying, oh, I was just lying about it. But why would I lie about that, since my name is No Quirk Man after all? As many of them would just sort of awkwardly laugh. Yeah, I guess why would you lie to us? Really just doesn't make sense, I guess, they would say. As the bus would slowly pull up to a massive dome-shaped building, as Izuku, along with the rest of his class, would step out of the bus. Good morning, Class 1A! 13 would yell from the top of the stairs, as the class would slowly walk up, making their way up the stairs to meet with the hero 13, who was the USJ just keeper. They were in task to keep everything clean, organized, and up and running. So, with that there, all of them would see 13 standing there. Today we are going to be doing a rescue training class. You all are going to be learning how to rescue certain people in just all sorts of environments. So, without any delay, let's head in to the USJ, she would say, smiling on, opening up the doors, as all of the classes would marvel at its just amazement. It was huge. Sure, it looked huge on the outside, but it was massive on the inside too, as they'd all look around, seeing how big this place was, as each section looked like its own world, with water section, flood zone, fire zone, earthquake zone. Everything just looked so crazy. As all of them were just looking around in amazement, Izuku's eye would catch on something that just didn't belong, as a purple spiral would slowly start to develop in the middle of the USJ. Izuku would be staring at it intently, just wondering what was going to happen next, as the portal would start to expand and expand and expand, and all of a sudden it was huge, as hundreds of villains would be making their way out of the portal, stepping out, as now every one of his classmates, along with the teachers, had their eyes fixed on the portal. What's happening? Many of them would ask themselves. However, one of them, Kirishima, would yell out, "Whoa, they even have fake villains here too? This place is amazing!" He would yell. However, Aizawa's eyes would dart towards him. These aren't fake villains. They're real. 13, protect the students, Aizawa would yell, jumping down to fight off the villains. As Izuku would be staring on as Aizawa would begin fighting all of the villains back, just trying to ward them off, protecting his class. However, there was just piles upon piles of villains, and they were now just piling up against Aizawa. Aizawa was going to win a one-on-one with all these villains, but they're not going to wait to one-on-one him. They're going to fight in a group. At least that's what Izuku had thought they'd do, because none of them are just going to go up at him one-on-one. Many of them are just going to try to take him down all at once without any synchrony, so that's going to cause confusion. However, if all of them try to go at him at once, he's not going to be able to do anything. And so Aizawa being pushed back and back and back, Izuku would jump into action. And right as Izuku jumped, a portal would go beneath his class, as all of them would start to fall through the portal. With some of them remaining on the staircase, Izuku would look back right as he jumped to go save Aizawa, as he would see his class slowly fall beneath the portal. He would try to grab at least some of them, trying to turn all of his momentum, but it just didn't work. As Izuku was still going down towards Aizawa, he would fix his attention back on him, reaching down his hands, grabbing Aizawa, yanking him up out of the pile of villains before landing right in front of Shigaraki. Planting his foot, he would jump on back, now dropping the injured Aizawa off with 13 and some of the rest of his classmates. Izuku's eyes would stare on directly at the villains now. Jumping down, he would wind his fist back, punching one of them square in the face, sending him flying backwards. This was nowhere near Izuku's full power. He didn't want to kill any of the villains, at least not while he's in UA. As laws still stated, you're not allowed to kill villains, even if they're most toughest opponents. It's just not right. Taking a life just isn't right. And so Izuku would make sure not to kill them, but to surely injure them enough to where they'd be out for several days at that. So with Izuku just jumping around punching, as he'd punch in one direction and 20 villains would be knocked down, he'd punch in another and 100 would knock down, and sure enough, after a couple minutes, Izuku had taken care of the entire mob, as Izuku would be standing there in the middle of all these bodies of villains, glaring on towards Shigaraki, releasing tons of killer intent. How dare these villains come and attack his class? Why? Why would they do this? They're kids! High schoolers! Why would they attack them of all people? As Shigaraki would stare on towards the glaring Izuku, was releasing tons of killer intent on towards him. Great job, green-haired person. Oh, I wish I could have called you by your name, but I don't have it yet. I'll surely find it eventually. Great job defeating all of those low-life thugs. Just be warned, I have something that's 1,000 times stronger than all of them. No, not 1,000. 100 times. No, 1,000,000 times stronger than all of them. You're not going to be able to defeat this. You'll never be able to even lay a finger on it, Shigaraki would say, claiming, just trying to exaggerate the sheer power to hopefully ward off Izuku, trying to make him scared. However, that didn't work at all. Izuku wasn't scared. As this would be happening, the portal was opened up again as a massive bird creature would stomp out of it, now glaring on towards Izuku, the only thing that was in front of it. Nomu. Kill that damn brat, he would say, pointing on towards Izuku. As Izuku would stare on towards the Nomu, as the Nomu would plant its feet down before jumping off with a screech, just signifying that the start of the battle had begun. As Izuku would see the Nomu jumping at him with sheer just amount of speed going on towards him, Izuku would dodge his attack before dodging another, as the Nomu would continue on going for just rapid amounts of punches. However, none of that worked at all. Izuku would continue on dodging every single punch, as the Nomu would screech out in disappointment before going faster and faster, trying to hit Izuku. However, all of this would just be not connecting, as Shigaraki would start to get more and more impatient, before fiddling with his fingers, before yelling, "What the hell are you doing, Nomu? Kill that damn brat!" As he would exclaim this, Nomu would screech out, just signifying that it had disappointed its master, as it was now saddened. However, this wouldn't stop, as the Nomu would now go its full strength and full speed, rushing at Izuku. However, Izuku would continue on dodging all of this. However, the Nomu would end up landing a punch right at Izuku's chest, sending him flying backwards. However, before Izuku was even able to hit anything, he would stop himself, before planting his feet once again, just like the Nomu had, jumping off towards him, his fist now in front of him, just spiraling as he would start spinning before hitting the Nomu square in the head, as its beak would start to crumble down, as the shards of the Nomu's beak would fall down to the ground, bouncing as it made contact. As the shattering would continue going all throughout the Nomu, as it would then explode into nothingness. Izuku had made the assumption that the Nomu really wasn't a person at all, and so if it were to die, no one really would care. And so that the Nomu explodes with just everything, parts of the Nomu splattering everywhere. Shigaraki would look on in just pure shock. How? How did you defeat the Nomu? He would yell, racing towards Izuku, with Kurogiri trying to stop him, reaching out. He couldn't, as Shigaraki would go on, racing towards Izuku with his hand out, moving his fingers, trying to touch Izuku with all 5 of them. However, before he could, Izuku would jump right into action, grabbing Shigaraki's wrist, twisting it. Shigaraki would yell out in pain. How the hell did you kill the Nomu? He would yell once again. However, he would get still no response. Izuku, still at Shigaraki, would wind back his fist, punching him square in the head, sending the knocked out Shigaraki flying back towards Kurogiri, who would open up a portal, as Shigaraki would then fall through the portal back into the villain hideout, as All For One would be looking on through one of the cameras in disappointment. I'm guessing the Nomu failed. Yes, All For One, the Nomu did fail, Kurogiri would say. I must have underestimated All Might. He's still got some power left in him, huh? He would say, questioning on towards the Kurogiri, looking down at the unconscious Shigaraki, as Kurogiri would shake his head. No, it wasn't All Might at all. It wasn't All Might? That Nomu was designed to kill All Might. It had enough power to do so. You're telling me one of those UA students had the power to defeat a Nomu? He would say, questioning on, now yelling at Kurogiri. Yes, it was crazy. He beat the Nomu with a singular punch. It just doesn't make sense to me in my mind. How can someone have so much power? That Nomu was designed to kill All Might even in his prime. And you're telling me someone was able to kill the Nomu with a single punch? Kurogiri would slowly nod his head, as All For One would then sigh. I guess I underestimated all the UA brats. Next couple of years and fights are gonna be some of the interesting ones, I guess. All For One would say, as we now cut back to Izuku standing there, just with his fist smoking from how powerful it was when he hit the Nomu. I could have captured that damn blue-haired menace. Yet I didn't. I elected to punch him instead of capturing him. A move surely on emotions and stupidity, Izuku would say, slamming his fist into the ground as rocks would shatter, sending rocks flying into the air. Damn it! How could I be such an idiot? He would say once more to himself, now sitting flat on the ground thinking. However, he would realize his classmates are still in trouble, so he would jump up before racing off to one of the zones that was quite close to him. I didn't want to have to do this. Kurogiri, send in that Nomu. He would say on towards Kurogiri, who would nod shakily. It was the one Nomu that actually scared him, as the Kurogiri would tell the Nomu to kill everyone inside the USJ, as Kurogiri would then drop the Nomu down inside of it, right as Izuku jumped off to go save other people, his friends in the other zones. However, before he could even make it 2 feet, the monstrous black Nomu standing above him with red scars littering all over his body would jump in, punching Izuku square across the face, sending him flying across the USJ, slamming into the fountain. As water would crash on Izuku's body, the Nomu would jump in, grabbing Izuku's head, slamming it down into the ground, dragging it across the floor, as the concrete would come up, smashing against Izuku's head, as the Nomu would pick up Izuku, throwing him into the glass, as Izuku's head would shatter the glass above him, sending small shards of glass flying down, just glistening in the light, as Izuku would land, grabbing on barely to the side of the roof of the USJ. As he would pull himself up, he would dart himself right on towards the Nomu, punching the Nomu square in the face, just destroying the half of the Nomu's head, with the other rest of his punch being sent flying the other way, shattering everything and anything in its path. However, the Nomu's hyper-regeneration quirk would instantly regrow its beak, as Izuku would look on in complete shock. I didn't want to have to use that Nomu. It was a last-ditch effort in case All Might somehow got all of his powers back and was able to defeat me. It has one of the best regeneration quirks I've ever seen. It rivals one I found a long time ago. Its hyper-regeneration will regenerate anything within a couple of seconds. Whoever defeated the first Nomu, they're gonna have quite the trouble defeating this one, all for one would say. So we now cut back to Izuku standing there, staring at the just midnight Nomu standing on in front of him. As Izuku would look on towards the Nomu as it would screech once again, and another scar forming over where the beak had started to regenerate. As Izuku would look on just in sadness towards the Nomu. If this was a real living creature that had thoughts and emotions, how much pain had it been in? Half of its body was just littered with scars and cuts and bruises from all different sorts of things. The amount of pain that this thing could have been going through, it just was insane, Izuku thought. So Izuku made sure he'd end the Nomu's suffering. However, when he winded back his fist, punching the Nomu's upper body, completely decimating it, and the upper body just flying everywhere as parts and chunks would land. However, all of them would end up coming back together just like a puzzle, fitting back together perfectly, regrowing the Nomu instantly. As Izuku would look on in shock, the Nomu would screech once again, jumping on towards Izuku, punching Izuku square in the face rapidly, over and over and over again, sending him flying back into the water zone. As his body would fall, crashing into the water, sending some of the villains flying the other way, creating huge waves just in the opposite direction from where he had landed. Izuku would get out of the water, propelling himself from the bottom of the pool that had been created. With Izuku now jumping up in the air, he would jump all the way to the ceiling. With his feet now behind him, he would push off the ceiling directly on towards the Nomu. Winding his fist back once again, he would punch the Nomu directly in its chest. With so much power, the Nomu's body would instantly just explode, with all of the parts and chunks being disintegrated from how powerful Izuku's blast was. As the pressure from the blast would keep on going, shattering a massive hole in the side of the USJ. As this punch would continue on going, just destroying many of the forest and trees behind the punch. As Izuku had done that, his fist now smoking, as Izuku would stare on towards many of the villains that had made their way back, hoping to be rescued after being defeated, barely crawling back by some of the students. Before seeing Izuku do that, he would look on back at them, as many of them would just be looking on in just pure shock at how Izuku had done that. As Izuku would look on towards them before pointing towards them. "So I'm guessing you don't want to feel what that thing just felt, do you?" He would say menacingly on towards the people. For many of them standing there would rapidly shake their heads as All Might would jump into the USJ, slamming open the doors, looking on after seeing what had happened with the punch that had destroyed half the forest behind the USJ. He would look on to see Izuku's hands smoking, as he would then jump off, rescuing all of the other students around there, as he end up jumping off towards Izuku after capturing many of the other villains. "Izuku, what was that destroyed the forest?" "Oh, it was me, All Might. I had to fight some bird monster thing. It was quite the strange thing. It was also quite powerful. It had lots of regeneration and other things," Izuku would say, as All Might would then nod his head before having tons of police cars arrive at the USJ along with ambulances carrying off some of the injured students, along with armored vehicles carrying off all of the villains. As Izuku would be sitting on one of the stairs of the USJ staring up at the sky, as All Might would thank Izuku for just buying time for All Might to get there, as Izuku would just say, "Oh, It's no problem, All Might. Later that night, when everyone else was gone, All for One would return to the USJ looking on at the destruction. Who is this kid? He would mutter to himself, looking around at the destruction before stepping out of the massive hole of the USJ, looking on at the decimated forest. I can only assume that wasn't All Might. That had to be the kid that defeated both of the Nomus. I can't believe I sent in the other Nomu when he was still able to defeat it. How could I have been so stupid? Now we have to find another hyper-regeneration core just like that one. Those are almost impossible to find. How could I have been so blind? All for One would yell to himself, having his voice echo around the USJ before creating a portal beneath him, falling back through it, going back to his warehouse. We now see Izuku sitting in class a month later. Nezu had given all of them a month off so that he could build dorm rooms and just dormitories so that all of them could be safer inside of the UA campus, along with just making moves to make it overall more secure. He also added a grocery store and other sorts of things so that they wouldn't have to go outside of campus to get just necessities. And so they'd be more safer and not have to be attacked outside of campus. Because in order for a villain to attack campus, they're going to have to deal with a whole lot of security, which is just going to be a nuisance now. So with Nezu upgrading the security 10,000%, now with dormitories, grocery stores, all of that to keep all of the students inside. So Izuku would be bidding his mother farewell, hugging her as she ended up crying. I'm gonna miss you, Izuku. Better promise to call me at least once a week. Izuku would just sort of laugh. Mom, calm down. We're allowed to visit our family on weekends. It's not like I'm just not gonna show up for just a year. You're gonna see me every weekend, Mom. You just need to calm down, Izuku would say, patting her back before bidding her farewell, leaving out the door. She would end up just smiling on at what her son had become. She was very proud of him, after all. With Izuku now walking in to the UA campus, Nezu would end up looking on towards all of them as he was in the Class 1A room. You all have been asked to come in a week early because you are the hero course. Well, just because you're the hero course, we're gonna give you a tad bit of special treatment and allow you to move into your dorm rooms a week early. So you all may now go grab all of your stuff from your household. You may now just go grab all of your stuff and all of that at the base of the dorm rooms, since we asked you to just collect it all and bring it here, piling on some of the UA trucks, and now you may all go set up your rooms. And as you would say, as all of them would race off, going to just be there so that they can relax the rest of the week. So with all of that done, after just a couple of days, many of them would just be hanging out in the dorm rooms. This is quite cool, huh? Now we're gonna be seeing a lot more of each other. Did anyone have a sparring match, Izuku would say, stretching, as some of the people that had seen Izuku's punch against the Nomu would instantly just say, nope, I am not fighting you. I have seen what you're capable of. Izuku would just look down, just in a depressed manner. Oh, come on. No one really wants to fight me. It'd be a great training exercise, Izuku would say, just sort of laughing, as no one would end up stepping up. Izuku knew that Bakugo would possibly want to fight him, but Bakugo was out doing other things, most likely training by himself. So with that, the week would end up passing, as Izuku would be sitting in class. Alright, class, as many of you know, today is the start of the sports festival. Aizawa would say, as all of them would look on in shock. Wait, why didn't you warn us? We didn't know this was the sports festival. Many of them would yell on towards Aizawa, who would just merely laugh. While all of you that had decided to take a month break of training, you all are probably now even below Class 1B level. So if you wish to keep your spot here on Class 1A, I suggest you better do well in this, as we're going to be moving down anyone who doesn't perform to Class 1A's standard down to Class 1B. Aizawa would say, "Oh, and that doesn't bid out the thought that class or the general course kids can also make it in. So I suggest you better be trying your hardest out there," Aizawa would say, just sort of menacingly laughing, knowing that many of the students now were just in a panic. So with that, Aizawa would hand out the special fitted UA Sports Festival uniforms before telling them all to go down and get on to the bus, as they're going to be getting changed in the locker rooms in the Sports Festival Coliseum itself. He just wanted to hand them all out so that he'd get to see just their shocked faces even more, he would say, still sort of laughing. So with all of them now on the bus, they would all be driving, wishing each other good luck, saying, "Hopefully none of us get moved down. That'd be quite the shame," many of them would say. However, many of the girls were whispering they could do sure without Mineta. It's hard with such a nuisance like him around all the time. With Mineta overhearing this, he would look at them just in shock. His tears would flow out of his eyes. "Oh, come on! You know you can't deal without me," he would say, trying to get them to change their minds. However, they would just say, "No, we could deal without you," pushing Mineta back, as he would just stare on, just in shame and misery. "How could I have done this? How could I have had all of the girls in this Class 1A despise me?" Would say, just in shock, staring at the sky. As the bus would slowly pull up, all of the students would end up just hopping out of the bus, as they would end up seeing many of the other classes heading in to the locker rooms as well. So with them having their own special locker room along with the rest of the class, they would all head inside, with them getting changed in their respective locker rooms before being funneled out into a waiting room especially designed for Class 1A. As they would be staring up at the TV, just looking at all the introductions, finally over the intercom they would hear, "And now, your favorite class, the top hero class of the first years, Class 1A, Midnight would say, announcing it, yelling on as the crowd would end up cheering in excitement, as the doors would slowly creak open, as all of them would end up stepping out, as the crowd would roar in excitement, as all of them would just be staring on. "And now, your first-year representative, Izuku Midoriya," Midnight would say, as we now cut into Izuku's old house, with Inko staring at the TV wishing Izuku luck, as Izuku steps up to the podium. "Hopefully, this all goes well and there's nothing dirty going on. Hopefully no one gets injured. Good luck, everyone," Izuku would say before stepping down from the podium, as the crowd would then cheer once again. "And now, let's begin the UA Sports Festival," Midnight would yell as the crowd would cheer in excitement. To start this sports festival off, let's begin with a race. Quite an interesting one at that. So for all of you that don't know what this event's going to be, there's going to be 3 obstacles. A robot army, an abyss. If you fall in it, you just lose, get eliminated, and a minefield. And the top 40 people that pass through the race first get to move on towards the next competition/event. The people that are below the 40 don't get to go on and are eliminated, and you all will get to move up to your special seats up in the stands, depending on what your class is. Midnight would say on, as all of the classes would nod in agreement. So, with that, let's begin, she would say, as heroes would jump down, pushing all of the students into a small, cramped hallway, as pushing and shoving would ensue, with people trying not to be claustrophobic about it, and it was so small, just the hundreds of kids shoved into one tiny little part of a building. So finally, the doors would creak open, as Izuku would instantly get shoved behind, or would feel a shove from his back, as shoving would continue as many kids would try to just get out of the hallway. inevitably Izuku would end up getting out after a very slow and long grueling process of getting stepped on. So with Izuku now out of the tunnel, he would be looking around. Seeing that everyone had already started running in a certain direction, Izuku would start to sprint off in that, easily catching up with everyone. And as soon as he saw the 0-pointer, he would just bend down before launching himself up in the air using his legs. As he would land on top of the 0-pointer, he would continue to run, making just small dents in the 0-pointer as he would go before jumping off again with so much power that the 0-pointer would start to fall forward with a dent in the back side of its head. So with Izuku flying through the air, he would easily make it towards the end of the race. As Izuku would cross through the finish line, the entire crowd would cheer in amazement. Whoa! That's a UA school record, even for the second and third years. We've never had someone complete the race so quick. That's crazy! President Mike would yell over the speakers. The crowd would even more roar from excitement. They had witnessed history. A record had just been broken on their own eyes. They just couldn't believe it, them would tell themselves. As finally, after just a couple more minutes, more people would start to cross over the finish line. Once all of the students would end up crossing through the finish line, Midnight would end up seeing all 40 of the students that had passed there. Alright, all of the students that didn't cross the finish line in time, you all will now, along with your teacher, will guide you up to where you will be seated. And now, let's begin with the second event, Midnight would say, as she would then explain what the cavalry battle was going to be, just telling how all of this was going to happen, this and that, and this and that. So with the cavalry battle explained how there's going to be just 3 people carrying someone on top with a headband, and that's basically it. You have to try to steal headbands and get the 4 teams with the highest amount of points, get to move on, all of that, as finally she would announce the points. The person in first place, yours, Class 1A, Izuku Midoriya, she would announce as the crowd would cheer, has 10 million points on their headband, as Izuku would almost feel 1,000 eyes dart right onto him, staring down, beating down on him with a glare, as Izuku just wouldn't care, walking up, grabbing his headband before putting it on. As the rest would get their headbands, Izuku would then have a 5-minute time to make up his team. However, no one seemed to want to join him. Izuku would go around trying to ask some of his friends, however many of them would just refuse, not wanting to be targeted by just the 40 other people in the match. So when the 5 minutes would be up, Izuku would be staring blankly at Midnight before he would raise his hand. Midnight can, do I have to have a team? Izuku would say as Midnight would just sort of awkwardly laugh. Well, since no one really wanted to be on your team, I guess you'll have to go alone. Izuku would just shrug his shoulders, saying, oh, okay. I guess that means I'm not going to be held back at all. Izuku would just think to himself as the rounds would begin. Izuku would see everyone trying to crash down on him, running towards him, as Izuku would jump up into the air, flying up above. Izuku would put his arms above his head as he would fall back to the ground, slamming his fists into the ground, sending just this grass and dirt flowing up in the air as flying mud and dirt would fall down onto everyone, causing a distraction. As instantly Izuku would zoom by everyone, grabbing many people's headbands with ease, easily pulling it off of them with such speed and precision. Izuku would continue on putting them around his head, as Izuku would continue on looking for anybody who was sort of challenging him at all. However, when Izuku would look around, no one was challenging him, still in a daze from all of the dirt and dust cloud that Izuku had caused with his just fists. So, with that, Izuku would continue running around capturing everyone's headbands, as finally there was just a select few that still had them. As 20 minutes would end up passing, everyone was chasing around Izuku for headbands, as Izuku would sometimes take them off, looking at the point total before just throwing them into the crowd of people behind him, as they would all fight for him, just hoping to get a chance to make it on to the next round. Well, for every time Izuku did this, it would always be for a very low point headband, like 5 or 10. So Izuku was basically just toying with everyone there, and Bakugo knew this. So he would up watching Izuku's running pattern, seeing how everyone was running this, and finally his team would come out of nowhere running towards Izuku. As Bakugo would grab one of his headbands, trying to yank it off, over Izuku would duck down beneath Bakugo's arm, grabbing it before throwing him off of his team. As Bakugo would land on the ground, Izuku would pull Bakugo's headband right off of him. However, before he could put on and put it back on himself, the timer would end. Luckily, Bakugo's team hadn't lost the points just yet, as it still remained somewhat on Bakugo. So Bakugo's team would narrowly, very barely end up passing on to the 1v1 tournament, as Bakugo just give a sigh of relief before snatching his headband back from Izuku, who was just looking on in shock, or just the Bakugo sitting on the ground. Midnight would then announce that everyone who had made it onto the final round would have a 10-minute break before the final event were to begin. Izuku would be sitting down in just a waiting room, as he would end up hearing some of his classmates walking up to him. "Hey, good job, Izuku, on getting first place over the first 2 events. Good luck on the next event. I didn't happen to make it into the 1v1 tournament," one of them would say, this being a Kirishima, as Kirishima ended up wishing Izuku good luck before walking back, just wondering what's going to happen, if Izuku's going to make it on to the finale and all of that, as no one in UA's history had even gotten first in all of the events just yet, and Izuku was looking like he was about to be the first person to get first in every single UA Sports Festival event. Many people in the crowd were hoping to see history once again with such a thing. So when the 10 minutes were up, they would all end up coming out, as Midnight would announce that it was a 1v1 tournament, and the arena had now been constructed. And the first match is going to be Izuku, the first placeholder, and Shinso, the last placeholder, Midnight would say, as both of them would walk up onto the arena. Izuku would wish Shinso good luck as the match would begin. Shinso would start trying to talk to Izuku, however, Izuku wouldn't just be talking, just completely clueless, as Shinso wasn't talking very loud. He wasn't yelling, and so Izuku didn't hear Shinso at all. So with Izuku just blankly staring at Shinso would start to get angry before yelling, "Why aren't you answering me? Didn't anyone tell you it's rude not to answer someone?" As Izuku would look on towards Shinso, or just shaking his head. "No, I mean, you were talking to me? I didn't realize you were talking to me." Izuku's answer would suddenly stop, as Shinso would smirk, knowing that he had already won. As Izuku would hear Shinso's voice, "Now walk out of the arena for me, will ya?" However, Izuku would turn around before taking a step, and then another and another, continuing on walking out towards the other side of the arena. However, something in Izuku's mind was ticking. Izuku would travel back into his mind after being brainwashed, as he was then sitting watching through a massive screen, looking on as he was taking increasing steps towards the outside of the arena. As Izuku knew he would end up losing, not wanting to lose to such a stupid thing, not wanting to be brainwashed and end up losing because of it. So Izuku would start to think, how could he do something like this? How could he get out of this brainwashing? Izuku's mind would start racing. He wasn't sure how, as his mother would towards the television screen, yelling for Izuku to snap out of it, to snap out of whatever was going on with him. As Izuku would be doing this, some lucky coincidence, all of this bird poop would land right on top of Izuku's head, as that would end up snapping Izuku out of the brainwashing right an inch away from stepping out. Izuku would look up to see the bird flying away, so he would end up smirking, looking on towards Shinso before running up to him, putting his other hand in front of the one he was winding back, as his fist would be clenched, punching Shinso right across the face with barely any amount of power as to not hurt him, as Shinso would be sent flying back, barely catching himself right about to fall out of the arena, as Shinso would glare on towards Izuku before jumping at him, trying to tackle Izuku. However, Izuku would merely dodge this futile attempt of getting him. As Shinso would be falling backwards, Izuku would push Shinso down to the ground before staring at him. That was quite the nice attempt to defeat me, Izuku would say, as Shinso hadn't said anything so he could respond to it himself. So with that, Izuku would grab Shinso by the neck before placing him right outside in the balance, with Shinso struggling against him, trying to pull Izuku's grip off of his neck. However, it wouldn't work, as Izuku would set Shinso down onto the ground with his feet touching the grass, as Midnight would then announce, "And Izuku Midoriya moves on to the next round!" As Izuku would only smirk before letting go of Shinso, he would say, "That was a nice try, Shinso. You probably should have worked on your, how do I say this, your combat skills, instead of just mostly relying on your quirk. That's a suggestion I would give you," Izuku would say before walking off, as Shinso wouldn't care about what Izuku said, just walking off mumbling to himself like how could he lose? He had him in his grasp. He was about to move on, but then that stupid bird just had to come in and ruin everything, he would be thinking, as Izuku would now be seen against Todoroki in just the semi-finals. He had beaten Ida with a clean victory in just the quarterfinals, and so now Izuku was facing off against Todoroki. Izuku would stare on towards Todoroki as Todoroki would yell that he was going to beat Izuku with only just his ice quirk, as Izuku would look on towards Todoroki with a look of confusion. "Why just your ice quirk? That's something I've noticed wrong about you. Why do you only use your ice quirk? Why aren't you using your fire quirk? You're basically twice as, you'd be twice as strong as you are now using your fire quirk. Why don't you use it? You're weaker when you don't use it. You could be far stronger than you are right now if you'd use it. I don't understand it." Izuku would just rambling on, just confused. However, Todoroki wouldn't care, just saying, "I'm not going to use that damn bastard's power." With Izuku, something would then hit him. He would realize Todoroki wasn't using his power just because he didn't want to. He was using it because he thought it was Endeavor's power. Izuku didn't know the full backstory between Todoroki and Endeavor. However, Izuku did know that something must have been wrong between it, so Izuku would yell out that it's not his power, Todoroki, and that it's his, much like in canon My Hero Academia, as Todoroki would all of a sudden get a realization. Oh yeah, he would think, as all of a sudden his flame side would burst out before flames would start barreling on towards Izuku right as the match began. As Todoroki would launch ice and then fire right at him, as the ice would merely cause a distraction, with the fire going in, melting through the ice, trying to reach Izuku. However, Izuku would merely just use his wind from how fast he was moving his arm to cause the fire to go back, flying back towards Todoroki. As Todoroki would try to use ice to block it, however, the ice would easily just melt through as the fire would continue on, going right back and hitting Todoroki square on. As Todoroki would look on, now badly injured from the fire that had landed a hit directly onto him, as he would know that Izuku was going to easily be able to just defeat his fire with all of the wind. So Todoroki would start to create more and more fire. Many of the fans in the crowd and just would wonder, what's he doing? Doesn't he know that Izuku's just going to fire that fire right back to him? However, Todoroki would start to spin the fire rapidly, as it would start going around in circles as a tornado would end up forming, as Izuku would try to use more wind to try to get it back, but it would only cause it to start spinning faster and faster. As Todoroki would point in the direction where he wanted the fire tornado to go to, as it would start going right towards Izuku. However, Izuku would raise his fist up, slamming it into the ground, creating a hole, as Izuku would continue on, just digging holes, just getting throughout the underground of the arena, as Izuku would end up blocking off the entrance to the hole so that none of the fire could get into Izuku. As Izuku would end up continue on digging to where he suspected Todoroki was, he would end up jumping right out of the ground with his hand in the air, as his hand would come right out of the ground right next to Todoroki's foot. Izuku would reach around grabbing something before yanking it down into the ground, breaking most of this concrete beneath Todoroki, pulling Todoroki down into it. Todoroki, being pulled down into the ground, would try to react by sending fire down towards Izuku. However, it wouldn't work, just sending smoke flying back towards him. As Izuku would pull him down into the ground, into the cavity that he had created, Izuku would punch Todoroki right across the face, before slamming his knee into Todoroki's face as well. As Todoroki would be left unconscious, Midnight would be waiting for something to happen, not being able to see underground as she didn't have an X-ray vision quirk. So Izuku would jump out of the hole before reaching down, grabbing Todoroki by the arm and pulling him up, so the limp body of Todoroki would be pulled up onto the concrete, as Midnight would then announce, "And Izuku Midoriya wins via knockout victory!" She would yell as Izuku would carrying over Todoroki towards Recovery Girl, where she would end up putting him on a stretcher before pushing him off towards just her room. As all of this would be happening, Izuku would be announced to be going up against Bakugo Katsuki in the final round, as Izuku would be seated in the waiting room waiting for him to be called up onto just the stage and arena to face off against Bakugo Katsuki. He would end up being stopped by Bakugo himself. "I've grown quite a lot over the past couple of weeks, Izuku, and I know damn well that I'm gonna beat you today. Don't you think with your little tricks, faking being quirkless, that you're gonna be able to beat me anymore? This is where everything turns around, Izuku," Bakugo would be saying, as Izuku would only just laugh at him. "Oh, sure, Bakugo. Keep telling yourself that. It's not gonna happen. And you know damn well it's not gonna happen either." As finally both of them would be called up onto the arena, as Izuku now onto the arena would start to stretch, as Midnight would announce that the match has begun. As Bakugo would launch himself off towards Izuku, using his explosions to barrel onto him, spinning, sending tons upon tons of explosions right on towards Izuku. As the onslaught would continue, as the smoke would end up dispersing, it would reveal that Izuku was gone. Where had he been? Bakugo had been too occupied with firing tons upon tons of explosions that he hadn't realized Izuku had already left where he was, really moving so fast that it left a shadow of that he was still there. As Bakugo would start looking around, not able to find him, Izuku would fly down, grabbing the top of Bakugo's head before yanking him up into the air and slamming him back down onto the ground. As Bakugo would yell out in pain before looking up, grabbing onto Izuku's head, before sending tons of explosions right onto Izuku's arm, burning it severely. However, Izuku would yank his arm back before winding it back again, punching Bakugo square across the face before punching him with an uppercut right there. Very, very not powerful punches at all. As Bakugo would look on, just walking backwards in pain, holding his chest, as Izuku would walk right up to the injured Bakugo, grabbing his head, making sure he didn't move. Izuku would wind his fist back and punch him square in the face, in between his eyes, right on the nose, breaking it instantly, as he would be sent flying backwards. As Izuku hadn't punched him with much force, but how fast he did it caused Bakugo's momentum to just be sent flying back, as Bakugo would land, hitting the cushioned wall behind him, falling down to the ground. "And Izuku Midoriya is your UA champion!" would say, as a couple moments later, Izuku would be seen at the top of a podium, with Bakugo standing there having to be tied up, not wanting to have lost in such an embarrassing way, with a silver medal around his neck, along with Izuku with a gold medal around his, Todoroki in third, getting a bronze one. As all of this would be happening, all of the students would be transferred back to the UA school building, as Izuku, along with everyone else, would end up having tons of papers just slapped onto Izuku's desk. However, before Izuku and the rest of his class could read anything, they would be interrupted by someone over the intercom. "Can Izuku Midoriya please come down to the office, please? Can Izuku Midoriya please come down to the principal's office?" As he would say over the intercom, as Izuku would stand up, walking off towards where it was. We cut back to Izuku's parents' house or Inko's house, she would be staring on at the TV watching Izuku beat Bakugo. And as midnight announced that Izuku won, she would jump up in the air and just yelling, "Yeah, that's my boy Izuku, good job!" She would yell now, crying at how successful Izuku has gotten in just a mere couple of months. She would think to herself that, as we now cut back to see Izuku sitting in Nezu's office. Izuku, I'm afraid I don't think you can be a student here at UA anymore. Izuku would stand up, slamming his hands down onto the ground on Nezu's desk. What do you mean? I've performed better than everyone in the first years. What do you mean I'm not allowed to be a student here anymore? You're not expelling me, are you? Izuku would ask angrily towards Nezu. As Nezu would take a sip of his tea before just laughing. Oh, calm down, Izuku, calm down. It's nothing like that. I just wanted to tell you, I think you're capable of being a hero already. Nezu would say, as Izuku would say, what? You think I'm capable of being a hero already? As Nezu would just laugh. Yeah, you're going to have to take a couple of tests, though, with All Might, of course, and a couple of other people that are capable of giving you a hero license along with a quirk license. But the strength you've shown is one of a hero, along with how smart you are, knowing not to kill enemies or not to injure them too much to the point they're going to be stuck in a coma for the rest of their life. You have shown quite the skills, Izuku, and that's why I believe you're capable of being a pro hero already. However, if you do end up passing the tests, I also have an opportunity that I want you to take as well. So if you're willing to take this test, you have to promise me that you'll take the other opportunity that I'm willing to give you. Okay, Izuku would say, still kind of confused on what this other opportunity of Nezu's was. Alright, I'll do it, Izuku would say, as All Might would walk into the office as the tests would then begin. As just around a week later, Izuku having been given the week off to take all the tests, Izuku would stare down at his hero license along with his quirk license as he would just smile on it. I've done it. I'm already a pro hero, Izuku would say with the No Quirk Man written in bold letters right across Izuku's hero card. This is where my hero adventure begins. Not just yet, Izuku. I'd like to hire you as sort of a helper, a teacher's helper for Aizawa in Class 1A. Since I want you to keep helping them as much as you can, so you already are quite much smarter than them in fighting and combat and all of that. So I just want you to go and help Aizawa, of course. Alright, if you can do that, you still get to hang out with all of your friends and all of that. You're still not a full teacher, but you are a full hero now, I guess. Nezu would sort of just laugh as Izuku would just sigh. I guess I have to take it, huh? I still get to live in the dorm rooms, right? Nezu would just nod his head. Of course you do. You're a member of Class 1A, of course, Nezu would say. Oh, and I'd also like to meet the student that's going to be taking your place. Izuku would look on questioning towards Nezu as a purple-haired boy would walk into the room. This is Hitoshi Shinso. He's the brainwashing kid that actually almost beat you in the sports festival. And he's going to be taking your place in Class 1A. So anyway, you're dismissed. You can go stop crimes or something now. As you would say, as the week of hero internships would end up beginning just a week after the UA Sports Festival had taken place. As Izuku would be running around stopping crime everywhere he would, all of a sudden Izuku would end up smelling smoke. So he would end up rushing off. He would see fire in the near distance. However, he would hear just someone just in pain. Izuku would look around before hearing the sounds closer and closer as he would continue on walking towards an alleyway. As Izuku would turn the corner, he would see a shadowy figure standing over a very bright-colored hero. Oh, if it isn't another hero. I haven't seen you before. Do you happen to be a new hero by any chance? Izuku would stop the small talk before jumping in the way of Stain or this mysterious figure from the person slumped up against the wall, jumping in, grabbing the person by their neck, yanking them back before putting them outside of the alleyway. Stain, I've been looking for you all over this place. I finally found you. Oh, so I'm guessing you're just another one of those heroes searching for fame by capturing the almighty hero killer. It's a shame. I thought with you saving that you might have thought that he was most important. Not all the fame and money you get up for being a hero. Izuku would just disregard all of Stain's thoughts as he would take a step forward towards Stain. However, his foot would make contact with something that sounded like metal. It was very clunky, of course, as Izuku would look down to see a blue-haired boy with his helmet off, just lying up against the ground, just with his eyes just staring on, glaring towards Izuku as if telling him to get out of there. As Izuku would recognize those eyes, it was his own classmate's eyes, Ida. As Izuku would grab Ida right under the shoulders, yanking him out, pulling him out of the alleyway, as well as Stain would merely just watch Izuku do this. Now, Stain, now that there's no one to get in the way of our fight, why don't we begin? Izuku would say as Stain would say, alright, sure. As Stain would get out his katana before rushing towards Izuku, slashing towards him. However, Izuku would dodge instantly. With this now being a real villain, Izuku would wind back his fist, punching Stain square in the face, breaking his nose much like he did towards Bakugo, sending Stain flying backwards as his head would make contact with the wall behind him. Stain's body would slump down onto the floor, completely unconscious from the blow to his head on both sides. Izuku would call an ambulance along with some cop cars, so they would end up pulling up onto the scene, so they would end up seeing Izuku after tying up Stain, who would then be put into an ambulance along with the two other heroes that had been injured by Stain. However, before anything like that could happen, while the EMTs were transferring Stain into ambulance, a flying gnome would end up coming down onto the ground, trying to grab Stain. However, before any of that could happen, Izuku would jump in the way, pushing Stain out of the way, as the gnome would grab onto Izuku before flying off, thinking that it had captured its target. As it was flying, Izuku would tell them not to just look for him and not to try to shoot the Nomu down, as Izuku thinks he knows where this is going. As this would be happening, Izuku would end up being dropped off right as a warehouse as the Nomu would end up knocking before disappearing into the abyss via a portal. As this knocking would end up happening, the door would all of a sudden open as Izuku, who had put something over his head very quickly so that they couldn't see his face, would be yanked in. As he would end up sitting onto the ground, all of the League of Villains would be standing around Izuku, who was sitting on one of the benches. Ah, if it isn't the hero killer Stain. You were in quite the close one there, weren't you? Being tied up and all. Luckily we saw that the Nomu came through right at the last second. As happening, Shigaraki would say, so, why are you wearing that thing over your head? Izuku would grab the thing before throwing it off towards Shigaraki. Damn it, how'd you get here again? You're such a nuisance, Shigaraki would yell towards Izuku as Izuku would just laugh. You just had to disappear right at the last second, thinking you got Stain already. But here I am, Izuku would say, winding back his fist, going for a punch, as he would end up punching Shigaraki as Shigaraki would slam into the glass behind him, shattering many of the cups and just dishes behind him instantly, as many of the other villains would stand up about to attack him. However, a ghoulish portal would open up. Stand down. I'll take care of him. If it isn't Izuku Midoriya, otherwise known as No Cork Man. You're quite the interesting one, aren't you? You don't have a cork, and yet you are highly powerful. You also don't have a dad. That's also something. Quite interesting, of course. But anyway, who cares? I'm not willing to deal with you right now. I'm far too weak for that right now, so why don't you go ahead and be gone? All for One would say. However, Izuku would jump into action, punching All for One right across the head as its helmet would shatter, breaking off into many different pieces. So All for One would act instantly, grabbing Izuku, trying to grab Izuku. However, Izuku would dodge this, falling into a gooish portal, as Izuku would then return right back to the front of UA campus. As Izuku's falling through the portal, the teachers rush out to go look and see if everything's okay. However, once they arrive, they just see Izuku standing there completely fine, like nothing ever happened. As he's standing there, they ask him what happened, to which Izuku just responds, "Oh, I'm guessing you all figured out that I got just kidnapped by one of those Nomu things. It just took me to the villain hideout. Luckily, I was able to map where it was, as I was watching the streets as it flew on, dragging me throughout the city, till it ended up dropping me off at some random warehouse at the edge of it." Izuku would say, "It also happened to me all for one," but he sounded weak, and he even said that he was too weak to fight me right now. So I have a feeling if we attack as soon as possible, that we'd be able to defeat him as quickly and smoothly as possible, allowing for any more victims of All for One to not be injured or hurt anymore," Izuku would say, as the teachers would nod their heads. So Izuku would be brought into a conference room, as they would all sit down with Izuku at the head of it. "So, I was at here," Izuku would say, pointing at a map where the exact alleyway was where he captured Stain. Then, all of a sudden, a Nomu came out of nowhere and flew down, picking me up. So, it picked me up and flew me down this way, crossed this street, and then took 3 left turns, and then it flew down 3 miles down the street, and then I ended up at this just warehouse, as you could say, pointing at the warehouse on the map. It was right here, Izuku pointing to it, as many of them would nod. But we don't have any reason, and we definitely shouldn't just push in just without anything. We need to prepare more for this. Plus, you, along with the rest of the students, are going to be taking final exams. You still technically are learning here at UA. You may be sort of a teacher helper, but you still have to do all the assignments, since you still need to learn. Sure, you're smart as a hero, but you still have to take all the tests, Izuku, even though you've already passed any of the more advanced ones. But anyway, I say we finish the UA just finals, and then do all of that stuff, and then we go and fight him. Because right now we need to start preparing up a force. Because if we just go in there, just weapons blazing, we're going to end up getting caught off guard, most likely. Because Izuku, they know you know the exact location of their warehouse, meaning they're going to most likely prepare for something like a full-on head-on attack. Izuku would nod his head, agreeing with Nezu, as he and the rest of the heroes there then just leave the conference room, as Nezu would be sitting there in the dark, just left with his own thoughts. This year has gotten to be quite interesting so far. Hopefully nothing too bad ends up happening for this onslaught, Nezu would say, as weeks would end up passing, as when all of the students would come in, they would hear that it was final exam day. And even though Izuku was a teacher's aide and had been helping them with all sorts of training, Izuku still had to learn. He still had his seat in the class. However, Shinso, who moved up to Class 1A, had his seat in the back, not taking Izuku's exact seat. Sure, Izuku may be helping people, but he's still not someone who's graduated high school smart. That's why he's still learning. If he was, then he probably wouldn't even be still in UA, likely being a teacher. So with that, the finals would begin, as all of them would go and put their hero costumes on. Shinso, who had only been in the class for around a couple weeks, had had his finals pushed back just a couple of months, so he could get some extra training and learning in before he were to face off. They didn't want someone who was severely inexperienced to just jump in right into the deep end without learning how to swim first, basically. So it would all do that, as Izuku would read up on the board that he was the last match, for there were going to be doing teams of 2 against one of the heroes at UA, and Izuku just so happened to be up against All Might, which Izuku would smile about. I guess I'm facing All Might. Maybe people will finally realize how strong I really am from this, Izuku would say. As Izuku would walk up to Nezu, who was sitting down just waiting for all of the students to arrive after being changed into their hero costumes. Nezu, do you think you could happen to record my fight with All Might? I want the word to get out about how strong I really am. How a quirkless person can get so strong. Nezu would look at Izuku just questioningly. Are you really sure about this, Izuku? Izuku would nod his head, showing that he was definitely sure about what he was going to do. As Izuku would end up walking over towards Bakugo, he would end up putting a hand on his shoulder. Bakugo would shove Izuku's hand off. Bakugo, you have to realize something. You aren't going to ever be as strong as I will. I'm not trying to say this to piss you off. I'm saying it to try to get it through your thick skull of yours, Bakugo. You're never going to be a true hero if you live your life trying to chase after a dream that's never going to come true. It's just not going to happen. Right now you're in denial, Bakugo, saying that you are stronger than me, that you will become stronger than the number one hero. But deep down you know, because I'm standing in your way, you're not going to. You need to stop focusing on such idiotic dreams and ambitions when you could be learning how to use teamwork better than what you already have done. Your teamwork skills are severely lacking, Bakugo, and without them, you're not going to become the true hero that you could be with teamwork. Izuku would say this before walking off, as all of the students would end up arriving and taking their test. As finally, it was time for Izuku and Bakugo to face off against All Might. As they would be stretching, they would then be pushed into a city, as All Might would then be released. He was forced to put weights on his body so that he wasn't to go full out and possibly injure one of the students. So Izuku would tell Bakugo to stay behind, as he'll scout out from the rooftops and possibly look to where All Might was. Bakugo would agree to this, as Izuku would jump up onto the rooftops looking for All Might. The only reason Bakugo agreed to this was to think about everything Izuku had said to him. It just didn't make sense to him. How could someone that just never said anything dumb to him all of a sudden just change with the flick of a finger? It just didn't make any sense at all. However, all of a sudden he would see the flying body of Izuku slam into the building next to him. As Bakugo would look on in shock, Izuku would grab some of the rubble and push himself up without a scratch on his body. His hero costume, though, had been left in just ruins, as his shorts and t-shirt just looked to have many holes in it, thanks to being cut from all of the different types of materials and rubble that Izuku had been slammed into. As moments before, Izuku was standing up on a rooftop looking for All Might, as all of a sudden a flying fist would come in and land contact right with Izuku's stomach, sending him flying back the other way towards Bakugo. As Izuku would stand up like nothing ever happened, Bakugo would look on to see the flying All Might come crashing down towards him. However, before All Might could make contact with Bakugo, Izuku would rush in, slamming his elbow into All Might's stomach, while also using his other hand to push Bakugo the other way. Bakugo, try to get his back, flank him from the behind. If I can hold him here, he's not going to be able to move. That leaves it wide open for you to attack him, Izuku would say as Bakugo would nod his head, rushing over, grabbing one of the side walls before exploding off, using that to push his momentum forward, as Bakugo would reach out with both of his hands, slamming them down into All Might's back before sending a massive explosion into it. As Izuku would let go, as All Might would be sent flying down into the ground, slamming his body into it, laying on his stomach, as Bakugo would slam his foot down into Bakugo slamming his foot down into All Might, putting his hand onto All Might's head. So who's the weak one now, All Might? However, the arrogant Bakugo hadn't realized that All Might was merely just pretending to be hurt and on the ground, as he would stand up, launching Bakugo off of him into another building. As Bakugo would get up out of out of the tiny hole that he had broken through the side of the building, as All Might would rush over, knocking Izuku to the side, trying to. However, Izuku would dodge right over All Might's fist, as All Might would continue on going towards Bakugo before grabbing him by the head and throwing him on towards Izuku. As many of the students would watch in horror, seeing that All Might looked to just be mercilessly just attacking both of Izuku and Bakugo, as many people would just think, I thought Izuku was strong. Is this really the true power of All Might? Has he just been faking how strong he's been this entire time? Many of the students would ask these questions, however, all of the questions they asked would be false. All the answers to it was merely doing this, as Izuku was merely just playing with All Might's mind, making it look like he was weak, however he wasn't. So this would be happening, Izuku grabbing onto Bakugo, setting Bakugo's limp body down, as Bakugo would try to get up, however Izuku would stop him. Bakugo, you're already injured. If you try to get up and fight anymore, you're going to get injured even further, and that's not going to be good. If you get injured too much, you possibly might have to leave the hero program. This is All Might we're talking about, Bakugo. Listen to me. Bakugo would sadly have to tap out, saying, fine. You better not lose this damn fight, Deku, Bakugo would say. Izuku would just sort of laugh. Oh, I won't, Izuku would say, standing up, looking directly on towards All Might, glaring directly into All Might's view of sight, before stepping one step before launching his body completely on towards All Might, winding one of his fists back before slamming his fist into All Might's stomach, as All Might would feel the true power of this blow, as he would be sent flying backwards, much like Izuku had when All Might had punched him in the stomach, as he would be sent flying through 3 buildings before finally coming to a stop right up against a dumpster, as All Might's body would lay there. He would groan in pain before barely being able to get up. His entire body was in pain, just aching. The pain was pulsing, just like a headache, as All Might would stumbly get from where he was, as the entire class watching over some of the cameras would look on in shock. Izuku punched him, and the punch didn't even seem like a true full-powered punch from Izuku. The punch had nearly sent him through 3 buildings. All Might was barely even walking. One punch from Izuku had basically managed to defeat All Might, the #1 hero. This just didn't make any sense to any of Izuku's classmates at all. How could All Might be so weak? As they had all imagined, Izuku wasn't truly as much powerful as he said he was, all just because of the simple fact he was quirkless. As many of their views shifted, thinking, oh, well, I could beat All Might, right? For many of them severely underestimating how Izuku was, even after seeing his countless fights winning with just ease. As All Might would get up, Izuku would rush towards him before getting out the handcuffs and placing them on the weak All Might's arms, as All Might would then just sort of laugh in pain. Well, I guess you won, Izuku. As All Might would end up falling backwards, completely unconscious, as his body would then have a puff of smoke come out of nowhere, transforming back into Skelly Might. However, Nezu would cut the cameras off along with the recording as soon as he saw the smoke. Well, that does it. So, that completes the finals. There's been a select few of you that may have had a teammate pass, but since you all didn't make it and had the teamwork, or your teammate do all the work, you all are going to fail as well. That also goes for Katsuki Bakugo. However, he did show a level of growth of teamwork since a couple of days ago, so I'm rather surprised. Anyway, now you all may go home. You all have a week to prepare for the summer training camp that we are going to be going to. I'm not going to tell you the location, but we're going to be there for a month and a half, so make sure you bring quite a lot of clothes, as he would say, as all of the students would nod their heads before going off to the mall, where they would end up just searching for all the supplies, and as would told them to, and many of them would also buy extra pairs of clothing so that they could just have it up there when they were up in the mountains, presumably. So with that, Izuku would sit down, just staring off at all of the people walking around throughout the mall, shopping, as a hooded figure would end up stepping down and sitting right next to him. Ah, Izuku Midoriya, it appears we meet again, the figure would say, as Izuku would just sort of laugh. You know, oh Shigaraki, I do have a pro hero license, so I could capture you right now. But what would be the fun in that, Izuku would say, staring off towards Shigaraki, before Izuku would reach out his hand, presumably trying to grab Shigaraki's neck. However, before long, the shadowy figure would just disperse, like it had never been there in the first place. As Izuku would open his hand, all he found was just a puff of smoke as it would then fly off, disappearing in the distance. As Izuku would just sort of laugh to himself. I guess it was just an illusion, huh? A week passes as we now see all of Izuku's classmates sitting on a bus. As they were all sitting, talking to each other and all of that, Aizawa would then tell all of them to get out of the bus as it came to a screeching halt. As they would all pile out of the bus, as they were now looking over one of the guardrails down below at just the ground beneath them. They were quite high up. And so when 4 heroes came out of nowhere saying that the wild pussycats, many of them were still kind of confused along with what was going to happen. Aizawa would introduce all of them, saying that these were the heroes that were going to help them just make their quirks and powers just stronger. And the way they're going to do that is their first training lesson, which is just going to be a start on what all of the hell they're going to be doing over the next couple of months here. So as all of this would be happening, one of them would slam their hands down onto the ground as the ground would start to shake. As all of a sudden, a landslide would happen, causing to where the students were standing to fall down, and they would all just now be on the ground beneath where they once were, up on the top of the road. So with that, Izuku would tell everyone that he has a plan as he would wait for the bus to speed off. As the bus would go off throughout the mountains onto the training camp, Izuku would tell all of his classmates his plan. He's going to jump up and look for where the training camp is, and once he finds it, he's going to jump up and carry one student or 2 or 3 at a time over towards the training camp and drop them off there before jumping back and repeating. So as all of his classmates would nod their heads, Izuku would grab the floor with his feet before jumping up in the air, looking off towards where the training camp was. He would spot a tiny little building miles away from where they were, so Izuku, falling back to the ground, would land before picking up 3 of his classmates, one holding onto his back while 2 of them were being held by Izuku's both hands. Izuku would jump up in the direction of where the training camp building was, as Izuku would easily make it there ease before dropping all of them off before jumping back to where his other classmates were. Izuku would keep on doing this until none of the classmates were left. Even though Bakugo or some other students said they didn't want Izuku to carry them like 100 feet up to the ground and possibly drop them, Izuku wouldn't care, just grabbing them and jumping off, saying that, come on, you have to face your fears sometime. You can't always be scared of heights. And so all of the students now at the training camp would all be just sitting around at a picnic table, just talking to each other, eating some of the food that was left out in sort of a buffet style right outside of the building. As the heroes there had left it there like covered, that so no bugs would get in it. However, they knew that these students wouldn't get there until later at night if they went through the forest and started looking for the building. And they just left food out there for them so when they got back. However, the heroes didn't expect them to be there within 5 minutes of being dropped off, as the bus still had a good hour throughout a windy road to even get there. And so when one of the heroes said, "Hey, Aizawa, I don't see any of the students. You know how we placed those mud monsters throughout just the forest, right? I don't see any of them through the mud monster's eyes." Aizawa would just sit back in his chair before smiling. "I know. Oh, I think they already made it there." "What? How? That's impossible. There's no chance they could have made it there already. They had at least 5 miles to run to get halfway there. There's no chance they could do that in only 5 minutes. Aizawa would then just sort of laugh in a maniacal way. Oh, there is one student that probably helped all of them get there, and it just so happens he's the strongest student. Really, do you mind telling us what his name and quirk is? I can only answer half that question. His name's Izuku Midoriya. His quirk? He doesn't have one. And that's the special thing about him. He doesn't have a quirk. You're kidding, right, Aizawa? You're just messing with us, right? There's no chance he could be that strong, having gotten all of the students there in the training camp in under 5 minutes without having a quirk. You must be kidding, right? Aizawa would simply shake his head as an hour would pass as the bus would slowly pull in to the summer training camp, where they would all see the students still sitting around at the picnic table just talking to each other. Aizawa would walk out before calling Izuku over before asking him how all of them managed to get there so quickly, where Izuku would then tell the story about what he did, as one of the Wild Pussycats would then grab Izuku by both his shoulders, shaking him. What's your quirk? Your teacher Aizawa said you didn't have one. That can't be true, right? As all three of the other cats would lean in, wondering what Izuku's answer would be, as Izuku would be let go and would simply shake his head. Nope, I've been quirkless since the doctor told me I was quirkless, so yeah, it's quite the anomaly that I have a quirk. It's, quite strange, Izuku would say, just sort of laughing. As the next couple of weeks would end up passing, Class 1B would end up arriving just hours after Class 1A had, as their teacher decided to bring them up as well, not wanting them to be left behind by Class 1A. So with all of that happening, Izuku would be stretching out the next day as the cats would begin their training. However, Izuku would say, I don't think I really need any training, as many of them, or they would all just laugh. Oh, so now the quirkless kid's saying he doesn't need training. One of the cats would actually volunteer to fight Izuku, as they still hadn't seen Izuku's power. Aizawa would warn one of them, or they would just say, please, I think I can beat him, as one of them would then realize, wait, Aizawa, isn't there a simple way you could prove that Izuku doesn't have a quirk? One of them would ask, as Aizawa would then just have a light bulb go off in his head, before putting his hand to his forehead and just shaking. How the hell did I not realize that before? I'm an idiot. Alright, Izuku, I'm going to erase your quirk, Aizawa would say, using finger quotation marks, as Aizawa would erase his quirk, or at least try to, using Aizawa's quirk, as Izuku would wind back his fist, punching it, as hundreds of trees in one direction would just be destroyed. As Izuku would look on towards Aizawa, as Aizawa would look on towards the cats, who would just be staring off in shock. I guess he really doesn't have a quirk. But that's insane! This just doesn't make any sense. So the training would begin with Izuku basically just being there to help. Many of his classmates were now students, as he is basically a teacher's helper with Aizawa. Izuku would be tasked with helping Shinso with his one-on-one combat for the first 3 days, as Izuku would just be training Shinso how to sort of throw fast punches, good punches, and all of that, as Shinso's really just going to have to be good at sort of that if his quirk doesn't work, as if Shinso's quirk is seen by one of the villains and he saw through Shinso's trap, Shinso's dead meat, and so Izuku was tasked with at least training Shinso in some basic self-defense. And so Izuku would also be tasked as basically just being a body, or just a body to have thrown attacks at, as many of the students found out that Izuku is pretty much invulnerable to any of their attacks, and so whenever they try to throw one at him and it lands with complete contact, it doesn't hurt Izuku at all. And so Izuku would basically just be a body that they could throw their attacks at and just practice with, as Izuku was there. Izuku would also be just training and fighting with barely any percentage of his power, so that they could learn how to fight people with stronger strength quirks. As a month and a half would end up passing, as it was finally the last day of the summer training camp, as all of them would just be rejoicing that their hell of a month and a half was finally over, as all of them would be sitting around, lounging around in the hot springs or anything, being given the day off by Aizawa along with the rest of the teachers. So with the day off, all of them resting up as the night would end up coming, they would all be called out before they would end up being told that they're going to play a simple game of Class 1B versus Class 1A. Class 1A and B are going to go into the forest, and Class 1B is tasked with just scaring all of Class 1A, or just trying to scare them. Since it was quite dark out, and it was a forest, it was seen as a perfect time to do sort of a horror game, and so that would start. Izuku, who just didn't want to do it, would be just sitting around before going inside to just go relax in the hot springs alone, before just leaving up to his thoughts. After 30 minutes of Izuku just sitting there, all of a sudden Izuku would just feel shaking and would hear a loud crash. Izuku would get up, put on his clothes before rushing out, looking out of the doors before opening them, and would see massive blue fire spreading over the tree line, where he would then see Aizawa and Pussycats just standing there in complete shock, as they just weren't sure what had happened. Izuku would say he's going to get a higher vantage point before jumping up, much like he did to help all of his classmates get back towards the summer training camp. So with Izuku looking up, he would end up seeing that the fire had spread all throughout the forest, as Izuku would look on just in complete shock. "We need to get all the students back here," Izuku would yell, as many of them would nod. Izuku would tell both, or just the cats, to go out there and try to find the students, while him and Aizawa will just think of another type of plan. Aizawa would agree with this, as the cats would go out looking for many of them. However, before they could even take a couple of steps forward, they would be surrounded by many other villains. Izuku would manage to disappear before rushing off, as he would end up finding just a random ledge. He had seen a small child around a couple of times named Kota, as he just happened to be one of the nephews of one of the cats. Izuku had heard the story of one of them after asking one of them about him, as Izuku would end up finding him just sitting alone at one of these ledges all the time. So Izuku would rush there, just presuming that he needed to go grab Kota quickly and bring him back, as Kota just wasn't going to do well in the midst of a villain attack. However, when Izuku arrived there, he would see Muscular, a massive villain, standing over Kota, just about to just kill him. As Izuku would rush in there, not dealing with anything or not holding back at all, he would wind back his fist, punching Muscular straight through the stomach. As Muscular, not ready for this, wouldn't be able to put tons of muscle over where he was about to get punched, so Izuku's punch would go right through Muscular's stomach, sending him flying over the ledge. As Muscular's fall would end up being broken by many of the trees. However, a tree branch would go right through the hole in his just stomach area. Muscular would yell out in pain before falling down to the ground, slowly just bleeding out, as Izuku would grab Kota, saving him this before rushing off so that nothing else would happen to Kota, dropping him off back at where all of the heroes were, as Izuku would easily defeat two of the last villains that had surrounded them with a hostage. Izuku taking them out, he would rescue the hostage, which just happened to be Tsuyu Asui. As Izuku would rush around the forest once again, Izuku would finally end up spotting the main area. Many of the students had found their way back to the training camp, while a ton of them were also stuck in a fight with two villains, Dobby and Moonfish. Moonfish, who would have sort of a teeth quirk, Izuku would grab the teeth, yanking him down before punching him right across the face, knocking him out instantly. As for Dobby, who would keep his distance with his fire, Izuku would ask Todoroki just to spread ice all throughout the area. As Todoroki would stomp his fist on the ground or stomp his foot on the ground, ice would spread over all of the trees around it, as the fire would struggle to melt all of the ice in time, as Izuku would glide along the ice before punching Dobby right across the face, before uppercutting him right in the stomach. As he would be sent flying upwards, a portal would be met as he would fall into the portal, or fall up into the portal, as he would now be seen back in the villain hideout. However, Izuku would end up just falling through another portal as well, as he would end up being just sat into a quirk-canceling chair in the middle of nowhere. As we see now the camp kids or the classmates of Izuku staring on in shock as Izuku just slowly falls into this portal. As Baki would reach out trying to save Izuku, he couldn't, before just yelling, "Damn it, I was too slow," he would think to himself, as we now see Izuku sitting back in this chair, just looking around, wondering what was happening. He could easily have broken out of this chair already, but he decided to wait and see what else was going to happen. So two people would step out of the darkness, a blue-haired person, along with a Darth Vader-looking person that just happened to be All For One, the person Izuku had punched. "Hello, Izuku. I guess we meet again. Finally, I've been able to capture you. It's a shame your life has to end this way." "Huh, I'm kidding. You're gonna become one of our best Nomus. That's if I don't steal your quirk. I've seen what you're capable of doing, and calling yourself quirkless is just an idiot move. I know you have a quirk, Izuku. It's just plain and obvious. No one can be as strong as you are without a quirk. How could you be such an idiot to think anyone would believe your foolish plan, trying to think, oh, he's quirkless? What a joke." As All For One would walk towards Izuku, placing his hand on his head before activating his power. However, nothing would happen. All For One would try again, however, nothing would happen, with Izuku just blankly staring up at All For One. "You know, All For One, I don't have a quirk. I thought you were smart, but it turns out you're just an idiot. I have no reason to lie to you about not having a quirk, so why do you think I would lie to you? There's just no reason at all for me to do something like that," Izuku would say, as a doctor would rush in out of nowhere with a needle trying to stab Izuku, where his hand would jolt up, breaking off the quirk-canceling cuffs around him that bolted his arm down onto the chair's arm, as Izuku would grab the needle before twisting it around, putting it right into the doctor that tried to stab him with it. "That's not gonna work on me," before breaking his other hand off, punching the doctor square in the face, as All For One would look on before punching Izuku square in the face, launching him backwards. However, it would do nothing at all, as Izuku would up just seeing All For One disappear back into a portal, grabbing both the doctor and Shigaraki, who's still just in shock about how fast Izuku had moved to defeat him. As this was happening, all of the heroes back at UA were planning on a rescue mission. So, Momo said she planted a tracking device on one of those Nomus, so if we look at where it says it is, we could possibly find out where Izuku is. All Might would say, as many people around him would agree. As All Might was once this conversation was up, they all agreed that they'll go out and find Izuku at 9 p.m. that night. The same night Izuku happened to get kidnapped. Well, actually at midnight, rather. So, with that, All Might would go over to the third-year dormitories, as he would end up knocking on Mirio's door. As Mirio would go over before seeing All Might standing outside of his dorm room door. As Mirio would say, "Oh, hey All Might, what are you doing here so late?" All Might would push Mirio back his room before shutting the door behind him. "Look, Mirio, I may not have much more time to live. However, you deserve my power. You want to become a hero more than anyone. And so, I deem you worthy of getting my quirk, one for all," All Might would say as Mirio would look on just in complete shock at All Might. "Your quirk? What do you mean, All Might?" All Might would then explain to Mirio all about it before handing Mirio one of his hair strands. "Eat this, Mirio, to gain my quirk, one for all." Mirio would slowly just nod his head in confusion before eating his hair, as he'd just say, "Okay, I'll meet with you in the morning if I'm not dead by then." Mirio would look on in shock at All Might asking why he was talking like that. However, All Might was already gone. One of Mirio's just people that he looked up to from a child, just said he might die tonight. Mirio was confused before looking onto his TV, flicking on the news, wondering what was going to happen, as he would be intently watching it. As hours would go by, as finally 12 a.m. struck the clock, as all of them would rush in, going towards the villain warehouse, smashing in to see tons of Nomus there. So all of them would have core-canceling handcuffs on them within an instant. So many of them would end up finding another separate warehouse location, which just happened to be where Izuku was being kept. Izuku decided to stay there, just wondering if they were ever going to come back. As All Might would end up smashing down the walls, Izuku would look on before greeting All Might. "Oh, hey, All Might. You're here too. That's cool. I'm waiting for All for One to come back. I want to fight him." All Might would look unquestioningly towards Izuku before just saying, "Okay," as they would smash down another wall, revealing what looked to be a bar with all the other villains. All Might, along with a wooded hero, would come in, capturing all of the villains. However, before they could put them into custody, All for One would come out of a gray, goopish-looking portal, as Izuku would jump into action, jumping in, smashing All for One's head clean in, as his helmet would shatter around him, sending the bits of metal and plastic and all of that going right into All for One's face, causing blood to slowly seep out of these holes as All for One would grab all of the metal stuck in him and just pull it out, putting it onto the floor before jumping back at Izuku as his face slowly healed back. As All for One would punch Izuku, however it did nothing, as Izuku would punch All for One square in the chest, sending All for One flying backwards into a building, where he would then be met with a punch by All Might right in his back, sending him flying down to the ground, as All for One would get up just laughing at him. "Oh, All Might, your punches have grown weak," All for One would say, but right as he got up, he would be met with a punch square in his face, as Izuku sent him flying backwards into another punch by All Might, sending him flying back down. As All for One would get up again, he would be met with a rapid flurry of Izuku's punches. Izuku had been severely weakened by the fact that he didn't want to kill All for One. All for One may be a super powerful villain after all. However, he didn't want to kill him. Killing just isn't his thing, unless it's sort of a mindless thing, Nomu thing. But All for One is living. He has thoughts, and he probably has a family. Izuku just doesn't want to take someone away from that. Izuku just doesn't want to do something so vile. As Izuku would be doing this, we cut back to see Izuku's mother, Inko, staring intently at the TV, crying out, looking at her baby, her child, fighting a big bad villain, punching him badly. She just looked on in complete shock, hoping that Izuku was going to be okay after this fight, not wanting anything bad to happen to Izuku. As this was happening, cut back to see All for One with a finger, barely being able to stand, as Izuku and All Might would finally let him stand, as his body would just really stand up, just wobbling, not being able to support himself, putting his arm onto the ground by a sticking up piece of concrete, All for One holding himself up by there, before injecting both of his fingers, or two of his fingers on his right hand, right into the concrete, allowing for his quirk to eat away at the concrete, going down into the ground before being met with Shigaraki, as it would go slowly up Shigaraki's foot before finally reaching his head, as All For One would transfer all of his quirks into Shigaraki, allowing for All For One to live on, as All For One's body not having a regeneration quirk or an immortal quirk keeping him alive. He would slowly waste away, just as his body would slowly deteriorate rapidly, as would then just turn into dust as his skeleton, as all of the flesh and muscle would slowly just disappear with his skeleton right after, as barely any bones would remain after that, just bones that would remain after 200 years of being left sitting somewhere, as All For One was hundreds of years old, seeing throughout generations, still being able to live. However, now with him gone, All For One was just nothing. He had managed to save Shigaraki along with the rest of the League of Villains, as we see All For One disappear as the news helicopter would look on, just wondering what had happened. As Izuku and All Might would walk back to UA, where they would then meet in a conference room with the rest of the teachers. I have a bad feeling about All For One's death, Izuku would say. All Might would look questioningly on towards Izuku, as Izuku would end just speaking. You saw what he did to that concrete block. When we went over to look at what he did to it, there was a massive hole going right down into the ground. I think he was able to transfer his quirk onto someone else. I think he transferred his quirk to Shigaraki, and Shigaraki managed to get away. All for One, the quirk still lingers on, and I'm guessing he possibly transferred his mind into Shigaraki's body too, through some sort of quirk. So All For One still lives on, just through a different body, a younger body, a stronger one at that too, Izuku would say, as All Might would look on just in shock at Izuku. You really think so? It's a hunch, but I think he lives on. Hopefully he's still quite weak, as it's still a new body and he'd still have to get used to it. But who knows? I guess we should just start preparing for another big fight like that. Along with you, All Might, you used up the last parts of your quirk. You're not going to be able to help me with the fight anymore. That means if we really want All For One to be gone for good, you're going to have to give me just a permit to kill Shigaraki, or All For One. Nezu, along with the heroes, would look on at Izuku, as All Might would end up just looking on questioningly at Izuku. Are you sure you want to do this, Izuku? Are you sure you really want to take someone's life? Are you really sure it's for the greater good of All Might? Shigaraki's going to kill hundreds more people if we don't do it sooner or later. He's going to steal their quirks. By now, All For One, after being defeated once before, he's going to start preparing for this. So if we start seeing lifeless husks of people just lying on the ground, we're going to know who it was. As he's going to be frantic, trying to find another quirk or more quirks that could possibly somehow make him stronger enough to be able to defeat me, Izuku would say, as all of them would end up nodding their head. So, I guess we should start preparing, Nezu would say as Izuku would nod. We cut back to see the night would pass as we now see All Might walking back to the third-year dormitories, where he would end up meeting up with Mirio. So, luckily I was able to survive that fight against All For One. However, now I need to train you on how to use All For One for All, my quirk, as I fear All For One's still alive, and that's why this quirk exists. One for All exists to fight All For One, the fight against good and evil. So now I'm training you, Mirio, because I deemed you worthy of my quirk. All Might would say as Mirio would look on towards All Might. Okay, as the training would then begin to train Mirio enough so that he could use his quirk. However, Mirio was already super strong, and so he could easily handle 25% of One For All right out from the start, as he would even be smart enough to use full cowling, much like Izuku had learned, however much sooner than Izuku had. So, with that, Izuku, now we cut back to him, as many of his classmates in the dorms would just be saying, "I saw you on TV, Izuku. It's the first time I saw you fight. Still can't believe you're an actual pro hero now and you're not just one of our classmates." It's still so weird to think about, many of them would say, as Izuku would just sort of awkwardly laugh. Yeah, it is still super weird. As we then look back onto the TV, as we then see the news start to report. As the quirkless hero who has stopped many just the villains the past. The quirkless hero, otherwise known as No Cork Man, has defeated many villains now, as the public is questioning if he really doesn't have a cork after what had happened just last night. However, this has sparked joy throughout the quirkless population, just as another form of hope that they too can become a hero. Damn it, Shigaraki! How many more times are you gonna run away from me? You're just preventing the inevitable from happening. So one of these days I'll end up catching you and then you'll be dead, Izuku would say, as Shigaraki would merely just laugh. Izuku had rushed in and grabbed Shigaraki's head before slamming it down onto the ground. Oh, Izuku, when will you learn to stop following me? Yes, I know when you finally end up successfully catching me that I'll die. But every time you fail, I'll just go and kill one of your precious friends. First it was Bakugo Katsuki, and then it was Chaku Uraraka. Oh, about that. How is she doing today? Oh, I know you visited her grave this morning, along with Bakugo. How are they doing? Do you mind telling me? Shigaraki would say, just laughing maniacally as Izuku would yell, "Shut up," punching him square across the face, making Shigaraki to laugh even more. Oh, please. You're a man devoted through emotions, twisted by them. Those cause your actions, Izuku, and one of these days you're gonna mess up, and then I'll get a fatal blow on you, and then finally this world won't have its protector. After all, UA school is still being rebuilt since I was able to destroy it all those years ago, hasn't it, Izuku? It's been quite hard remembering it all, Shigaraki would say, as it had been quite the long time since we last seen our protagonist, Izuku, just around 5 years, as on the graduation day of Izuku, Shigaraki would finally make his appearance after 2 long years of just being in hiding, and training, of course. So Shigaraki would easily just destroy the UA building using all of his many different types of quirks, and so Izuku would try to stop him. However, Shigaraki would just disappear using one of his many portal quirks that he had just amassed over the years. Izuku would end up finding Shigaraki just around a year after this, and Bakugo would be there too. However, Bakugo wouldn't be able to escape with his life still intact. However, Shigaraki was. The same thing would happen just 6 months after that with Chaku Uraraka. As now, a year and a half later, Izuku finally was able to track down Shigaraki once again. However, Shigaraki had grown quite powerful. Izuku knew the only way he was going to be able to stop Shigaraki's reign of terror is if he was to hold on to him this entire time. But with Shigaraki's insane amount of strength, that would be quite hard, but you can't forget Izuku is also quite the strong one. As this would be happening, Shigaraki would start to struggle, trying to get out of Izuku's grasp, just hoping that he could escape to possibly put a portal and just escape, as if Shigaraki were to not just get a centimeter or an inch away from Izuku, he'd be gone. That's how fast Shigaraki was. Sure, Izuku was also fast as hell as well. However, Shigaraki could easily create a portal within the blink of an eye and be gone. And so Izuku, keeping hold of Shigaraki's neck, would end up jumping off, propelling himself off into the near distance, where Izuku would spot a forest, landing down there, slamming Shigaraki into one of the trees. "Ah, so I see you finally decided how you're going to defeat me. That's quite the question, but in order to punch me, you're gonna have to let go of me, aren't you, Izuku? Oh, how you are," Shigaraki would say, before Izuku would just shake his head, as he would quickly grab Shigaraki with his other hand, winding his right hand back behind himself before propelling it forward, smashing it into Shigaraki. However, Shigaraki's insane regeneration ability would easily keep him intact, as all it took was just a tiny drop of blood for him to completely regenerate in an instant. Shigaraki had gotten so many different types of quirks over the 5 years that it was just insane. He was quite the strong one. As Izuku would end up remembering many of the people and friends that he had lost over the years, many of his even classmates that had died in just League of Villains related activities that weren't by the hands of Shigaraki. Izuku would use that, winding his fist back once again, yelling that he's going to kill Shigaraki once and for all. Winding his fist back before punching Shigaraki square in the face, sending him flying backwards. However, through Izuku's anger, he hadn't used his full power, causing Shigaraki to be propelled backwards. Shigaraki would be lying there in pain as his regeneration quirk didn't stop the pain from happening. Izuku would realize jumping off towards Shigaraki. However, it was already too late, as he would put a portal right beneath him. However, Izuku would be barely able to slip through the portal as well, tackling Shigaraki to the ground. Shigaraki would end up yelling how did he get through the portal, as he had moved quite quickly, but through Izuku's anger, he had managed to summon a lot of his power, jumping through the portal as well. As we now see the Nomu doctor standing there looking at Shigaraki, and as many more high-end Nomus were on the way. However, Izuku would slam Shigaraki's head right into the glass before throwing Shigaraki into the Cork Doctor. Shigaraki would try to create a portal once again. Izuku would grab his neck before slamming him into one of the test tubes, as the liquid would end up flowing out as the high-end Nomus would end up falling down 2 weeks since they hadn't fully just sprouted just yet. As this would be happening, Izuku would end up stomping his foot right on top of Shigaraki's head, destroying it instantly. However, it would easily just regenerate. Izuku would continue on doing this, making Shigaraki feel in constant pain. So the doctor would end up doing something, getting one of just the Nomus, or the high-end Nomus, in one of the warehouses using a portal quirk that Shigaraki had given him. As this would be happening, the Nomu would end up coming in trying to attack Izuku. However, he would end up dodging it, one-punching him instantly. So the Nomu wasn't the highest high-end or the king-end Nomus that were the best of the best. As sure, it had a small regeneration quirk, but it was nothing compared to Shigaraki's. As Izuku completely obliterating it in one punch, Izuku would stare back on towards Shigaraki before punching him square in the gut before slamming him down into the ground. As Izuku would end up slamming him into one of the test tubes, opening it up, as he would end up starting to struggle, not being able to breathe. However, he would easily shatter the glass, as Izuku would end up grabbing Shigaraki once again, who would start to choke on all of the water that had been, or all of the liquid that had been in the tube. As Izuku would send a punch in the direction of the doctor, sending him flying backwards, only to be caught by another high-end Nomu. As this would be happening, Izuku would grab Shigaraki once again, before end up jumping out of the warehouse, seeing fire all over the city, as Izuku would keep his hold of Shigaraki, slamming him down into the ground, as fire would end up burning through Shigaraki's skin, setting him ablaze. As the regeneration was working quite fast, but the flames kept it at bay, halting all of the regeneration. As Shigaraki just continued to be just incinerated by the flames, as his screams in agony would continue lingering on through Izuku's ears, who remained still, holding him down, all while the flames just burned and exploded around him. As finally Shigaraki would end up being nothing more than just bones, as Izuku would wind his fist back, punching them, disintegrating the bones, making sure that nothing was left of All for One, and that All for One's legacy couldn't be continued. As Izuku would end up punching, making huge amounts of wind, making all of the fire dissipate, Izuku would sit back onto the ground, giving a sigh of relief, knowing that the thousands of people that Shigaraki, along with All for One, who had been killed by them, could finally be at peace now that All for One, the quirk, was gone. They no longer had to worry about it. And that's where this what if ends. Izuku's final goal of defeating Shigaraki would end up coming to fruition, with All for One no longer existing. Izuku would end up going on to remain as the number one hero, as he had been the number one hero throughout his time searching for Shigaraki, stopping any of the villainous tasks or just villainy that had gotten in his way. And Izuku would continue on heroing until he deemed himself too weak to go on anymore, or just letting on just someone else to use his legacy, most likely being his own child, whether that be a son or daughter, as they would end up going on through his legacy, as he would end up retiring to train his own child, so that they can continue on the legacy of just being in the Midoriya name. And Izuku's quirklessness would also cause many of his children, or just his children in general, to be quirkless. So Izuku would train them in the arts of no quirk man. And so, once again, this is where this story ends, with the legacy of Izuku carrying on through the generations and his techniques going on, remaining a family secret, and the dominance of their power would remain on throughout the world. And that is where this What If series comes to an end. I hope you all did enjoy What If Deku was One Punch Man, and if you did, please consider subscribing, as it really does help this channel out, and you can even be notified when other series do end up coming out. And yeah, I thank you all for watching once again, and goodbye.